Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We begin in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Peace be upon all of you. My name is Tanveer Ali. I'm the founder of the Halal Money Forum. We are a not-for-profit that has been established to help develop a strong ecosystem of Islamic finance businesses, especially in the West. One of our events is the Halal Money Show, for which we're very excited to host all of you today. It's a half-a-day virtual conference on creating wealth and entrepreneurship. We have a phenomenal lineup of speakers, some of the best and finest in our industry, and some very powerful topics that we'll be covering today, from areas like franchising to cryptocurrency and digital assets, how you could build a unicorn, how you could develop a conscious wealth mindset, and a lot more. So stay tuned. We have a powerful agenda today. But before we begin the event, we would like to begin with the recitation of the Holy Quran. So we have a young brother who will be doing this. He's a recent graduate of UC Davis, and now he's at Stanford, where he's doing his clinical trials research. So I'd like to ask Mohsen Rangwala to kindly recite the Quran and then do a quick English translation, and that'll kick off our event. So I'll turn it over to Mohsen.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. واذكروا إذ أنتم قليل مستضعفون في الأرض تخافون أن يتخطفكم الناس فآواكم وأيدكم بنصره ورزقكم من الطيبات لعلكم تشكرون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تخونوا الله والرسول وتخونوا أماناتكم وأنتم تعلمون. واعلموا أنما أموالكم وأولادكم فتنة وأن الله عنده أجر عظيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن تتقوا الله يجعل لكم فرقانا ويكفر عنكم سيئاتكم ويغفر لكم والله ذو الفضل العظيم. وإذ يمكر بك الذين كفروا ليثبتوك أو يقتلوك أو يخرجوك ويمكرون ويمكر الله والله خير الماكرين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful. And remember when you were few and oppressed in the land, fearing that people might abduct you, but He sheltered you, supported you with His victory, and provided you with good things, that you may be grateful. And you who have believed, do not betray Allah and the Messenger, or betray your trusts while you know the consequence. And know that your properties and your children are but a trial, and that Allah has with Him a great reward. O you who have believed, if you fear Allah, He will grant you a criterion and will remove from you your misdeeds and forgive you. And Allah is the possessor of great bounty. And remember, O Muhammad, when those who disbelieved plotted against you to restrain you or kill you or evict you, but they plan and Allah plans, and Allah is the best of planners. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Mohsen. We really appreciate that heart-touching recitation of the Holy Quran, and our best wishes and duas with you while you're at Stanford, and we wish you the very best in your career. With that, folks, really, really excited to have all of you here. In order to make this event happen, we had to partner with some of the top professional associations within the Muslim community. So I'd like to welcome folks from TechWadi, from JM, from Shine Labs, from the WVMA Entrepreneurship Club. We also have a few folks who have joined us from Open. In my welcome remarks, I will take a minute to acknowledge them and share a quick line about each of these wonderful professional associations. And also want to thank BayMuslim Media, our media partner, for making this happen with the live streaming and for the tremendous work that Brother Nilam and his team have done. Jazakallah khair. I just have a few minutes for a few comments on who we are as, what is the Halal Money Forum? What do we do? More importantly, why do we do what we do, and the kind of value add that we would bring to our community. So we'll kick off the first speaker in about 5 minutes. Very excited to have Sheikh Faraz Adam from UK joining us. He's one of the top experts in Islamic finance and an advisor to dozens and dozens of Islamic finance organizations and startups. His talk is going to be on how to create wealth through digital assets and tokenization. And beyond that, we have a bunch of other great speakers. Before I do that, I want to go over a few slides just so that you understand, especially the first timers. Some of you have attended our inaugural Halal Money Expo that we did late December of 2021. It was a successful event. We got a lot of great feedback, and to keep doing that, we're also rolling out these smaller half-a-day virtual events. In the future, we'll probably get to in-person and hybrid events, but for now, it's just easy because our speakers are all across the world. Our community is all across, US, primarily in Canada. So I think virtual works out, right? So just a few lines on who we are. We are a not-for-profit initiative that is committed towards building a strong ecosystem for the development of Islamic finance and Islamic fintech, and especially in the Western part of the world, in US, Canada, and UK, and hopefully will grow to other countries as well. Now, why did we form the Halal Money Forum? We have three very clear objectives. The first one is we wanted to put the spotlight on the Islamic finance organizations that are here, right, that are catering to the Muslim community. We would like the Muslim community to get to know these organizations very intimately, because these are the ones that are going to help you to create, to grow, and to protect your wealth, right? And so we're very proud to partner with organizations like Saturna Capital, which offers the Amana mutual funds. Very excited to have Wahid join us, and they're doing some phenomenal things in the area of Islamic fintech. In the past, we've had representation from other organizations such as UIF or a cooperative known as Amin Housing, and many others, right? So we really want to put the spotlight on these organizations so they can better connect with their consumers, and they're able to better serve serve all of you. The second area that is very dear to my heart, and I've personally made some sacrifices to clear up my time to be able to invest the time and resource in this, is the development of entrepreneurship in the area of Islamic finance and Islamic fintech. During COVID, when we had the lockdowns and everything was shut down, I had the opportunity to start interacting with a bunch of fintech entrepreneurs, and I had shared this with some of my the few thousand social media followers that I have, that I said that I'm seeing a new breed of young Muslim entrepreneurs that are trailblazing fintech, having founded startups that are inspired by Islamic finance, right? So it's very excited to see what was happening, and I think there's a tremendous opportunity. I may share a few data points that you may find very inspiring. And the thought that came to me in 2020 was that, hey, we need to build a strong ecosystem so that these startups are able to get the funding that they need to be successful, right? At that time, there were about 140 startups that were being tracked in the Islamic finance space. And in just 3 years, it is more than triple. It's almost triple, 2.5x growth. There's almost 360 startups that we are tracking within the space. And I think there's a tremendous potential. The goal definitely is to get to a point where we have dozens of unicorns, right? Everyone knows the definition of a unicorn is a startup with $1 billion valuation. I think there is potential in the community to have dozens of unicorns, and we're very excited about what Wahid is doing. I call them the Roger Bannister of Islamic finance, because they are on the way to being a very visible, a very well-known fintech in the Islamic finance space, right? So there is definitely going to be a relentless focus on driving entrepreneurship. And the last thing why all of us are here today is the educational aspect, right? You may not care about entrepreneurship. Not everyone may care about entrepreneurship, but most of you want to know that, hey, am I doing the right things financially, right? Do I have the right amount of investments for my retirement, right? Am I losing money in certain investments or whatnot, right? So the whole idea is to bring some of the top-notch companies to do educational events like we are doing today with the Halal Money Show, where you can you can walk away feeling empowered through events like this. I had mentioned before, a lot of our events will be virtual, but we also get to a point where we could do hybrid events where in a local community center, an Islamic center, we have 50, 100, 150 people attending locally, but the event is also streamed, so people from other parts of the country could also join, right? So that is what we do, right? I mentioned this. We did an inaugural event in December of 2021. Last year, I didn't have the bandwidth to do it, but inshallah, we are planning to do an event end of this year, which will be our second annual Halal Money Expo. In a year, we'll also have 2 or 3 Halal Money shows. Today, we have some of these topics that I already mentioned. The next one most likely will be dedicated to real estate, and we'll do another Halal Money show as a 3-hour event on cryptocurrency and digital assets, because I think there's a lot to be learned over there. All right. In November, we are planning to roll out a fintech week in Silicon Valley, where we'll fly in fintech entrepreneurs from different parts of the world to come down here, meet some of the other successful fintech startups, meet with executives, and then also meet with investors, right? So the whole focus of that event is more around getting these startups the fund, the investments that they need, right? And on an ongoing basis, we will have, for the last 3 years, I've had the opportunity to host several fintech entrepreneurs from startups like DFinance, and we have Dr. Omar Fisher, who's an executive at DFinance. So in the past, we've hosted DFinance and Munzil from Canada, and digital. I'm losing a couple of names, but I've hosted Sheikh Faraz Adam and a few others for these ongoing webinars and fireside chats, etc. Will be on an ongoing basis. So these are some of the key events that we planned. I don't want to spend too much time on this slide, but just to understand the potential, right? By next year, the global market for Islamic finance will be close to $4 trillion, about 3.7 trillion. And this is as per Bank of New York Mellon, right? Just one area within Islamic finance, which is takaful insurance, will be $100 billion opportunity by the end of 2030, right? By the end of 2050, we're looking at 2.8 billion Muslims, right? People are excited about the growth of India, and it's 1.3 billion population, and then the growth of China. But I think the opportunity in the global Muslim community is going to be staggering, right? It's going to dwarf those other 2 big success stories, right? So it's going to be a tremendous opportunity, and I don't think enough people in the community have woken up to the fact that there's going to be so much of opportunity in the community, and we need to line ourselves up to be able to leverage that, right? Just to put things in perspective, just in the 5 countries, US, Canada, France, UK, and Germany, the purchasing power of the Muslim community is expected about $500 billion. That's almost $500 billion, right? It's a staggering amount, right? In a little country like Malaysia, they have a Hajj savings plan called Tabung Haji. A few years ago, they had about 10 billion assets. Today, they have about 15 billion assets, right? So imagine the potential that we have our entrepreneurs having, Hajj savings program built on new technology in markets like Bangladesh or Pakistan or India or in the Middle East, right? I think there's enormous potential to do a whole bunch of startups, and there's so many different categories, and I'll also cover that in a moment, right? And lastly, very exciting to see that the growth of Islamic fintech is outpacing the overall fintech sector. Now, why are we having an event like this, right? So this may sound silly, but over the last, I would say, few years, I've had interactions where I once met someone from the family who had got a very nice job at this big technology company and good salary, and he went and bought himself a nice BMW, a BMW 5 Series, right? And when I was talking to him, I said, "Hey, have you invested in your company's 401k plan?" And he was already 4 or 5 years in the job, and he hadn't invested in the 401k plan, right? This is what I call the blind side, right? He got the car, which I'm happy for him, but he hadn't invested in crypto because he didn't know a whole lot about crypto. He didn't know that, hey, he's missing out by not investing in the 401k plan, right? Something we take for granted, like, duh, how could you not do that, right? we're hoping events like these will be able to help protect your blind side, to help protect our blind side. Another example, a surgeon friend of mine went and bought an ultra luxurious home, right? It's like a resort, and I'm happy for him. But at the same time, like, hey, is that the smartest thing to do, right? When he said, hey, I put all my money in this home, right? And we want to bring some of the best wealth management professionals, the best financial planners to the community, so you can make the best decisions for yourself, right? In the Bay Area, a lot of my friends are like director of engineering, head of engineering, and they're heavily in the equities market, right? But a lot of them have not really ventured into real estate, right? Perhaps it's maybe there may be reasons for that, but again, we want to have sessions on real estate so they understand how they could leverage and how they could diversify into areas like real estate, right? Another example I'll use, and I'll end with this. A dental friend of mine had taken a mortgage, right? And because he's making good money, he says, rather than a 30-year mortgage, I'll take a 15-year mortgage, right? And then I can, instead of a $7,000 payment, I can pay $11,000 a month, and I can pay off my mortgage in 15 years. A few months later, a year or so later, he said, yeah, let me buy another property. When he went to the banks, all the banks said, hey, you have great income, but you have this big $11,000 a month, mortgage payment. And because of this, we cannot approve you for a second loan, right? And we are hoping we can, help prevent situations like that. And in my own experience, right, real estate has been very good to me, alhamdulillah. But on the commercial side, when I made a commercial investment, I went through some personal difficulties and ended up losing a significant chunk of money on a commercial real estate deal. And we would like to do some of these things that we can address this so you feel more empowered. And that's the whole idea of doing an event like what we are doing today with the Halal Money, with the Halal Money show, right? This is my slide on fintech. I was telling you there was 140 fintechs in 2020, and now it's grown to 360. And there's some very, very powerful categories, right? From payments to trade finance, to personal financial management, to cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and so many other categories. I think there's phenomenal opportunity here, right? Just a quick disclaimer: we are not here to give you financial advice, but we are bringing to you firms like, for instance, Saturna Financial has all the regulatory approval to do what they do. So we are going to bring the established entities out there who can provide the education, but we are not necessarily offering you any investment advice. Also, in areas like cryptocurrency, we ask that you speak to your respective Sharia scholar, right? Because some scholars will say it's haram, some will say it's halal, some will say it's, proceed very cautiously. So we are not here to give you advice saying that is crypto halal or not. You do that from your scholar, but someone like Sheikh Faraz will share his perspective, or someone like Shamoon Siddiqui, who's been into Bitcoin for a long time, will be able to share his perspectives as to how he compares Bitcoin with some of the other asset classes out there. Right? Lastly, I want to thank our partners. Without you, this would not have been possible. TechWadi is an amazing organization for entrepreneurship and professional development for the MENA region, which I think as a region has probably the biggest opportunity. I think the opportunity is a lot more than India, which is Middle East and North Africa, right? So TechWadi does phenomenal events. We're very excited to have folks from TechWadi join us. Shine Labs is all about helping people succeed in their professional and academic and entrepreneurial careers. It's based in the Bay Area primarily, but they have grown to beyond the Bay Area, and people there, phenomenal people. They do a lot of great events. JM is one of my favorite groups. It's a bunch of WhatsApp channels where people are very collaborative, right? If you could be in commercial real estate, or you could be having an issue with your residential tenant, or you may have some issues in property management, and you could put questions up there, or questions on crypto, or questions on stock market, and people offer their advice. They're very collaborative. They have dozens of WhatsApp groups. Each WhatsApp group has several hundred people. If you want to join, it's for the Muslim community, just money. If you want to join them, you could reach out to me, or this Shamoon Siddiqui later today, and they can tell you how you could join JM, right? Also want to mention WVMA. Right here in Silicon Valley, there's a beautiful masjid in Los Gatos called West Valley Muslim Association. They established an entrepreneurship club. Just a few weeks ago, they did a beautiful seminar on the legal side of startup businesses, right? What to keep in mind, what to avoid, what you must do. They brought some of the finest lawyers in the community with a lot of experience, with a lot of success in Silicon Valley, who did that legal workshop. A few weeks before that, they brought the CEO of LaunchGood for an event along with a couple of other entrepreneurs like Muhammad Faris from the Productive Muslim, to talk about how you could be successful in your careers, right? So again, thank you WVMA for your support. Lastly, Organization of Pakistani Entrepreneurs Network is probably one of the biggest professional organizations within the Muslim community. I would say they have phenomenal events called the Open Forum every year. We have a few folks from Open as well. And lastly, I want to thank BayMuslim Media. They're doing some very cool work. Their last couple of videos in Islamic finance got thousands of views on YouTube, and we encourage you to support them and watch their videos and share it with everyone else. Lastly, I provided my at Halal Money Forum is a brand new Twitter handle, so we'd like to be more active on Twitter. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I provided the BayMuslim Media YouTube channel, and we also want you to recommend speakers and topics for future events and introduce us to other stakeholders in Islamic finance. So with that, I'd like to again welcome all of you. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have a great 3 hours of entertainment and fun and learning and some really cool speakers. With that, I would like to get ready to introduce our first speaker. Thank you again for joining us, and I'm hoping you'll come back for future events as we continue to roll out programs. Jazakallah khair, and may you have a great weekend. So with that, I would like to get ready to bring up our first speaker. Just give me a minute momentarily while I stop my. All right. Okay, so our first speaker for the day is Sheikh Faraz Adam from the UK. He is a very respected scholar in Islamic finance. He's an advisor to dozens of Islamic finance startups and Islamic finance organizations. Most recently, he's director of Fasset. Fasset is a cryptocurrency platform. I think everyone needs to check out Fasset. They're doing some really cool things, and I'm hoping Sheikh Faraz would spend a minute or two telling us, some of the cool things they're doing at Fasset. He's also been the CEO of Amana Advisors, which is a advisory and a consultancy firm on Islamic finance. So Sheikh Faraz, we are so excited to have you here. You're our first, speaker, and your topic today, and this is just for the benefit of everyone. His topic is going to be creating wealth through digital assets and tokenization. Sheikh Faraz, I was reading a report from Boston Consulting Group that says that the tokenization market is pegged at $16 trillion by the end of 2030. I think we have an enormous opportunity. We can't wait for your talk. Thank you for joining us. And, without any further ado, we'd like to hear from you.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you all here today. I'm speaking from the UK, as you can tell with the accent, but it's phenomenal to see the work that you're doing at the Halal Money Forum. And it only makes sense because it's the Halal Money Forum to begin with a halal discussion on crypto, I guess, right? So hopefully I wish to present my slides, which you should be able to see on the screen. And yeah, as I mentioned, the whole point of today's short discussion on creating wealth through digital assets and tokenization is just to give you an idea that what is happening in the digital asset space, what is tokenization all about, and how do we create wealth in this space, right? But as I mentioned, because it is a Halal Money Forum, it only makes sense to first tackle or discuss and give you some insights on the halalness, quote unquote, right, of digital assets. But there's so much going on in that space. There's many challenges in the digital asset space. As I've mentioned, crypto is Wild West. It literally is. There's so much going on. There's people from all backgrounds, all walks of life with different intentions in the crypto market and the cryptoverse. Some have genuine and good intentions. Some have not so good intentions. But that's the truth with any market and any industry, right? Secondly, there's uncertain regulation. We don't know where certain jurisdictions and governments are heading in terms of crypto. How will they treat crypto? Will they recognize crypto? Will they ban crypto? And so you are seeing different views develop and different approaches in the market. And that means then there's some level of uncertainty. When there's uncertainty in regulation, it stifles and somewhat impedes and inhibits innovation. Because why would somebody innovate, experiment, and test an asset class if tomorrow the regulators are going to ban that asset class? So there's also this challenge. The regulation is still not very clear, and that's sometimes a barrier to entry. Number three, there's fraudsters out there. Today, unfortunately, somebody can launch a crypto from their bedroom, make $1 million, and disappear tomorrow. And that's happening. We've seen what happened with FTX, how mismanagement at a large level, at such a macro level, can impact the entire industry. So these are things which we need to keep in mind. And the truth is, that's with any industry out there. Again, it's not something specific with crypto. This can happen in other industries as well. However, other industries have perhaps more regulation now in place and more safeguards and safety nets in place. CBDCs is another area, which is central bank digital currencies. You may be seeing this more in the news. And there's a lot of discussion going on, and many working groups and working papers have been released on the concept of CBDCs, where central banks will be issuing digital currencies. And there's many pros and cons, I guess, and many people are debating over privacy, security, control, surveillance. All these are different areas to be discussed when it comes to CBDCs. And how will this be different to fiat, really? So there's a lot of discussion whether CBDCs is the right direction or not. Number 5, there's many types of digital assets out there in the industry. Again, the problem with that is whilst it's good we have many different types, but at the same time, some types of digital assets really serve no value, right? Really serve no value whatsoever, but they've just been created and launched, and due to market manipulation, FOMO, fear of missing out, and other reasons, these cryptos ride the wave, have a lot of investment initially, or at least a lot of speculation, and people make money early on before people losing out later on. A typical Ponzi type of scheme. So there's many types of digital assets, but that's why the Sharia, from a Sharia perspective, there's a discussion to have. How do we treat these digital assets? Number 6 is a lack of serious experimentation. Again, this ties into my earlier comment that I made, where when there's regulatory uncertainty and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow in terms of regulation, not many people want to experiment with such a volatile, uncertain asset class. And therefore, nobody's really putting their mind and energy and effort behind finding value-adding, wealth-generating solutions and opportunities through crypto, right? Nobody wants to take that risk, because what if something goes wrong tomorrow? All that effort, that fundraising, that time will be wasted. So there's a lack of serious experimentation, especially in, I would say, in our kind of part of the world where we are. There is a fear somewhat, as well as multiple challenges. So people shy away from experimentation, or if they do experiment, it's at a very small scale where it might not be sustainable in the long term. Number 7 is many tokens have no genuine utility or benefit, which I touched upon briefly. A lack of Sharia guidance and thought leadership. This is a major one. This is the Halal Money Forum, and that's why I'm bringing this subject up here. There is a huge gap in terms of thought leadership. From a Sharia perspective, from an Islamic perspective, how do we understand these asset classes? How do we engage with them? How do we treat them? How do we benefit from them? And how do we safeguard any potential harm, right? These are all things which we need to think about, because the Sharia has an answer, an opinion, and guidance upon every single matter. It can't be that there's digital assets and Sharia doesn't have guidance on it. It can't be. It's either that we haven't put the effort in to understand what's going on, or we're just being lazy. That's the truth, right? But Sharia has guidance for everything. That's why Allah tells us in the Quran, and the Quran is tibyan likulli shay. It has guidance, and it's clear proofs for everything. There's everything in the Quran and Sunnah for us. So there's definitely guidance for digital assets in the Quran and Sunnah and the writings of the fuqaha and Islamic jurists of the past. We just have to really put effort into understanding this. That's why thought leadership in this space is lacking, and it's really needed at the moment. Number 9, cybersecurity is another major issue. Anything that's digital now is prone to several risks, cyber risk being one of the key ones. And that's why We hear stories and we've read in the news previously how people have lost millions, hundreds of millions of pounds and dollars worth of crypto assets due to hacks. So cybersecurity is another great challenge in this space. And number 10, something which we don't appreciate much, but the way we deal with the financial system in the West is not the way it's dealt with in the East. To us, something might be a luxury, but in the East, it may be a necessity. And that's because the market dynamics are completely different. We may have some stability, some form of governance. Our currencies may be less volatile, they may be stable. However, there may be other parts in the world which are not privileged or are facing challenges in these very same areas in terms of governance, in terms of the economic frameworks, in terms of the regulatory system, in terms of their volatility of the currency, in terms of financial inclusion and access. So we may have privileges, and that's what makes crypto for us somewhat we just flirt with crypto or just test crypto for fun. But for other people, this is really a savior. This is really something which can save them, their wealth, and the wealth of the generations to come. So we need to understand that there's different people in the world with different needs. Something which for us may not be a need, it could be a need for other people in the world. But then the greatest question is really from a Sharia perspective, what are the considerations? How do scholars debate digital assets, and what are some of the thoughts raised by different Sharia scholars? So I would say if you were to look at digital assets, you could potentially categorize and you could group all the different arguments in these 5 points. The first one is being categorization. What I mean by that is scholars debate that how do we categorize crypto? Is it an asset? Is it something like land, real estate, like gold, like in that level of asset class? Is something, it's somewhat of an independent entity which you're investing into, or is it just a fictitious thing, right? Because some scholars have voiced this view that cryptos in reality are nothing. That's why if you look at how Bitcoin works, when you invest in Bitcoin, and perhaps somebody else will discuss this later on, what are you actually investing in? What are you actually owning? It's just a ledger entry. That's all it is. There's an entry on the blockchain, on the ledger, that you have a claim to X, the UTXOs, right? So there's a whole thing there to be discussed. Whereas other scholars say, no, we look at how we benefit, how we see it in customary practice, how we engage with it. So it's a matter of perspective and understanding. Today we have electricity, we have so many different things. We may not feel it, touch it, it may not be tangible, but everybody pays for it. Everybody benefits from it. Its effects and impact, as well as its kind of use cases, are open in front of everybody. So scholars debate on this first point. How do we categorize crypto? Those scholars who feel that it's not something which is aligned with Islamic law, it's not something which has some level of independence, some level of tangibility, even if it's digital tangibility, right? They'll say it's nothingness. There's nothing that exists, and therefore it's not a valid asset class in and of itself. Whereas other scholars of the view, no, there's something that exists. Existence can change based on realms. The digital realm is not the same as the physical realm, and therefore we need to have a framework which judges the digital realm different than the physical realm. And therefore, these scholars have a different idea when it comes to digital assets. The second point is about utility and benefit. When it comes to utility and benefit, the scholars argue and debate again, is there real benefit in here or utility? If not, then it can't be halal, because everything that is halal has some level of utility and benefit. If something which has no utility and benefit cannot be halal, because the entire Sharia is premised on the idea of being value adding, of being something of benefit. Everything that's Sharia compliant, which is halal, which is useful, in Sharia has utility and benefit. So this is another debate. There's many cryptos out there which are purely speculative. They add no other value. Rather, people are just taking a view that this is going to increase in price and therefore I'm going to make a profit. But in and of themselves, they are not adding any value whatsoever. Number 3 is governance. Another area of debate is because many governments have banned crypto in certain parts of the world. Scholars have raised the issue that if it's banned, and until the government does not approve it, it cannot be Sharia compliant. And this goes on to a classical debate when it comes to cryptocurrencies which are used as money. So, for example, Bitcoin, which was designed as a peer-to-peer payment mechanism and peer-to-peer payment system. These scholars of the view that until the government doesn't recognize Bitcoin as a legal tender and a means of payment, it can never become a means of payment. And therefore, its private money can never be issued, as per this opinion of scholars. Whereas other scholars are of the view that really, if we think about it, it wasn't that authority or authorization from the government was the key thing. Rather, it was a governance system. Classically speaking, 500 years ago, you couldn't think of a system of governance which was de-linked from the government because there was no method or technology to govern and regulate independently of people. People were always needed. But if governance is really the key, that can be de-linked from people, and therefore, if you have a system which is autonomous and has some level of governance and fulfills all the same goals and achieves all the same things which a government and a body of people would deliver, then why would this not be permissible? So you see the debate there. This is a debate of back and forth between scholars. Then speculation is another key area. Many people say speculation is not permitted in Sharia. Speculation is not permitted when you're not investing in anything which is Sharia compliant. But if speculation, what does it mean? Speculation just means taking a view on something with the hope that the value of that thing will increase. That's what speculation is. From a Sharia perspective, as long as the underlying asset class is Sharia compliant, then you just taking a view that the value is going to increase, that's absolutely fine. Of course, there are certain investors, some famous ones who make a distinction between speculation and investment. They say investment is that thing which generates a dividend or an income, right? An income stream in and of itself. They call that investment. And they call speculation when that asset class doesn't generate any income. That's how they differentiate between investment and speculation, right? But nonetheless, from a Sharia perspective, both are acceptable. You can invest in land. I can purchase property, real estate, without using it whatsoever, and with the sole intention that I know in 5 years' time, I believe so, in 5 years' time, this real estate will inflate in its price, and therefore I'm just investing in it. Now, as long as I fulfill all the Sharia principles, nobody will say this investment is non-Sharia compliant, because I fulfilled everything. I've invested in an asset class, right? And finally, screening framework. Those scholars who are of the view that digital assets can be Sharia compliant, they are a valid property and asset class. There is some genuine utility in some of them. Governance is not a key issue. They're not speculative always, because speculation depends on how you invest and what you invest in. They then mention number 5, you need a screening framework. You need to screen digital assets just how you screen stocks and shares. And so many scholars have developed or thought on this. I've also developed a screening framework and criteria, which can be found online. Even in my book, Introduction to Islamic Fintech, you can read upon the screening framework that I propose for digital assets and crypto assets. But this is just to give you a summary, which I hope is beneficial for everybody in this forum, just to appreciate the debate that goes on, because it's genuine debate. There's many sides and many reliable voices on either side of the table. This is just to give you now digital assets, the different types of digital assets out there. Crypto assets, which are probably the most well-known, just a digital representation of value. In the most simple way to say it, it can represent almost anything. an asset, utility, a service, right? All of these things can be represented on a blockchain. We can call that crypto asset. These are fungible tokens, meaning that every single one can be replaced by the other. Then you have NFTs. NFTs are non-fungible tokens, meaning whatever they're representing or whatever they are linked to are unique in and of themselves. So typically each NFT has a unique identifier and there's metadata there which is linked to something not in the NFT but something off chain. So it'll be something online or something even offline. But there's a link between this NFT, it's a certificate almost, which proves ownership or has some level, some data in there connected to another asset, which is unique in and of itself. The asset could be some artwork, some unique artwork. It could be a document which is unique. So I remember there was an experiment, or at least an idea to launch NFTs to indicate and represent title deeds to assets, because every title deed is unique. Okay, every title deed is unique. So therefore, when NFTs can be used for this, it'll be phenomenal. It's a different way to record data. Now, for us, in our part of the world, this may not be something which is a breakthrough technology because we have secure systems to reflect ownership and we have records. But in other parts of the world, the governance isn't as strong. The records are not so reliable. So NFTs are a game changer for such communities because they're an independent source of truth almost, right? And so we have to look at it from that perspective also. Stable coins, number 3, stable coins are tokens again which have been released, and the idea is how do we create stable crypto assets to kind of counter the volatility that exists in the market. So they typically, a coin is launched and released, but it's connected, it's pegged to either a fiat currency, so the US dollar, where every one stable coin has a 1-to-1 ratio with a fiat currency. So it's many times it's redeemable. And therefore the ability to redeem at 1-to-1 stabilizes the value of that stable coin. That's the theory of it. Many a time, if you look at the data, there's sometimes there's a difference between, because of supply and demand and the trading and liquidity. But generally speaking, the ratio is upheld most of the times of 1-to-1, right? So you could get a stable coin and convert it into something else. Then there's tokenized assets. When we talk about tokenized assets simply refer to the idea of taking physical assets or even online assets and tokenizing them. So instead of securitizing, and we know securitization, this is tokenization. So assets are pumped into tokens, and many people can invest and access these tokens, which are available on the distributed ledger technology. So any asset can be fed into that. So you can get property, you can tokenize it, issue these tokens, which represent fractional ownership in that underlying property. When it comes to wealth creation in the digital asset space, then there's many ways when we talk about wealth creation. The first one is the store of wealth itself and store of value, because some digital assets are designed primarily with scarcity and portability and all the unique features when it comes to storing wealth and the ideal elements that wealth can be stored. They're designed in that particular way. So it's hoped that from a long-term perspective, these assets will be a store of wealth. That's the first thing. Second thing is fractional ownership, which we just discussed. That asset tokenization is a huge game changer, as Brother Tanweer mentioned in the beginning, that how this industry is going to boom. That it can help leverage secure and transparent transfer of ownership, fractionalizing ownership of assets, increasing liquidity, reducing investment barriers, reducing costs, making transactions faster, financial inclusion globally, because then many people can access these different investments through tokenization. Hedging is another one, because crypto assets can be used to hedge. So if you think about somebody who's living in another part of the world where there's so much volatility in the currency, as you can see, inflation in some parts of the world has gone to up to 100%, literally 100%. So how do such people fight off inflation? They need something else to counter that. So crypto assets, digital assets, it's a no-brainer for them, something which is accessible if they can't get other asset classes like gold or something else. Staking is another method of creating wealth through this entire space, where you can participate in validating transactions on the blockchain. Now it can be anybody. Before, all the profits and benefits are centralized to one entity. They gain everything. They take all the fees. But these digital assets have democratized the validation method, and therefore everybody can participate in validating transactions, which is in everybody's interest and benefit. There is democratization when it comes to digital assets, and wealth is created and wealth is distributed as a result. Just the final few points of tokenized assets I want to share with you. Anything can be tokenized: financial securities, intellectual property, physical property we mentioned. So these things can be fed into a digital platform almost, right? And tokens can be issued against these assets. So you can get an ownership interest in physical property, in physical commodities, in real estate, in land, artwork and collectibles, medication, tickets. These things have been done. There's examples of tokenization of these particular assets. And there's many benefits, as we mentioned: fractional asset ownership, there's peer-to-peer asset trading, end-to-end asset traceability. These are the benefits of tokenization. Compliance, smart contract-based automation, automated record keeping. So tokenization has all these different benefits, which are exciting for those involved in this space as well as in financial services, because with all these things in place, is a potential of cost reduction, and as such, things become cheaper, more accessible, and also you can offer such asset classes and investments across the world. Finally, my last slide is to do with this the idea of the other side, right? As I mentioned, we have to think global when it comes to digital assets, when it comes to tokenization and this technology. We have to think about, we may be well off in one part of the world, and we may be benefiting and having a robust financial system, and we may have financial services which are accessible, but many people don't have that in other parts of the world. So there is promise and hope that digital assets can bring financial inclusion, lower barriers to entry, there's potentially less cost involved, and it connects the world. It kind of levels a playing field globally. And that's what I'd like to end with. Thank you very much. I hope that was of benefit to everybody. I'd like to pass it over to the organizers. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you so much, Sheikh Faraz. Jazakallah khair. That was brilliant. How much you covered in a short time, and we'd love to have you come back. For especially when you do an event dedicated to crypto and digital assets, we'd love to give you more time and seek more knowledge from you. I love the fact you laid out the challenges before you even started, and the things you covered, like it has to have utility and benefit to be halal. And I also encourage our audience to look at his book, Introduction to Islamic Fintech. It sounds like a great lot of wealth of information there. So I think they can find this on Amazon, Sheikh Faraz.
It's available for free as a PDF online. I've shared it on my LinkedIn. So if you go on LinkedIn, it's available. Just download it and read it. I want people to read and benefit.
Jazakallah khair. Again, thank you so much. It's fairly late. You're sharing us a Saturday evening with us. We really appreciate it and can't wait to have you back in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum to everybody.
Wa alaikum salam. So, folks, I was a little guilty of taking a couple more minutes in the welcome speech, but I think we're still going pretty good on time. Our next speaker, equally excited to bring up our next speaker. He's also an expert in the Islamic finance space. He's originally from Seattle. He's based in Seattle, But right now, this weekend, he's in Bahrain for a big conference on Islamic finance, and he was telling me that some of the top scholars and some of the top minds in the global Islamic finance space are there at that conference. He is the author of the book Conscious Mindset. He's a serial entrepreneur, a founder of the Dubai Innovation Forum, the chief strategy officer of a very exciting startup called DFinance, which is solving this huge student debt crisis. What DFinance does is they buy out student loans. A young professional landed a job, they can buy out your student loan and you can pay it back through an income share agreement. It's a very exciting startup, so please check out DFinance. So we have with us today Dr. Omar Fisher. So without further ado, let's bring him up.
Thank you, Tanvir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Dr. Fisher.
Okay, let me share my screen. And, okay, how is that? Chrome window, sorry. Window. Where did it go? It's here. Okay, so window, there it is. And I need to go view and full screen.
We see it now. Beautiful.
Is that showing?
Yes, we see it.
Excellent. So I'll start in. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and a warm welcome to everyone who is part of this Halal Money Show. It's such an exciting proposition. I'm delighted to be here, and I want to thank Tanvir and the other organizers for inviting me. Whether you're here live with us, and there'll be a Q&A part to this program as well, or whether you're joining us in a replay, welcome, welcome, welcome. Now, whether you can see it or not, I'm wearing two hats. Tanvir mentioned that I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for a startup called DFinance. You can find us on www.dfinance.com. And we are forwarding a very exciting proposition of enabling young people who are burdened with debt to become debt-free, and at the same time, to kind of, let's call, transform their earning power into an investable asset. So more on the website. The second hat I'm wearing is relevant to this talk, which is about conscious wealth. And so disclaimer up front is I'm not going to talk about terminology. I'm not going to talk about investment structures tonight. Instead, we're going to focus on basic building blocks, and I like to call them the building blocks of self-leadership. So without further ado, we're going to focus on the conscious wealth mindset, and I hope you derive value from the few minutes that we'll share together. So the primary goals are actually three. My goal for you as listeners tonight or morning is to open a pathway to an understanding of what is self-leadership in order to prompt self-discovery. Be on a learning journey. After all, I truly believe that life is lifelong learning. And third, we want to introduce you, in case you haven't bumped into the concept of conscious wealth, what are the components that go into having a conscious wealth mindset, and what is the consequence of that? Now, to package it up early, the core idea of this brief talk with you is one cannot lead others before first learning to lead oneself. Hence, self-leadership. So what are the five component parts that go into conscious self-leadership? It starts with core beliefs, who we think ourselves to be. Now, actually, this is broken down into two component parts, subcomponent parts. One is thinking, which is the patterns of how we perceive our world. And actually, we are today, you and I today, are the sum total of all of the thoughts and ideas that have occurred in the past, right up to the present moment. So if you like who you are and who you're becoming, God bless, keep thinking that way. And if you see some gaps and there are some things you'd like to change, then perhaps this talk will give you a spark to think about how you're thinking. Reflect on that, because when we have a thought that we think frequently, it becomes a belief. And so the patterns of thinking soon condition us as individual human beings into a belief system. So, for example, if you over time believe that you're not good in managing money, guess what? Your thoughts are going to just reproduce that as an idea. Now, the second component, and we want to correct that through this Halal Money Show and Future Money programs as well, to help you build self-confidence into informed decisions, which I'll come to in just a minute. The second part of this component in self-leadership is imagination. Now here, we want to take something from Deepak Chopra. And he believes that we all should approach our life as limitless possibilities. So it's really the quantum field on an everyday basis, if I could put it that way. And part of how we exercise our imagination is to be receptive to inspiration. And inspiration typically comes outside, or you could find it within, which is triggered from an inspiration, which in most cases is spiritual. After all, you've probably read that many of the great innovations and discoveries were made when people were dreaming, or in a dark room when they were contemplating the challenges that they're facing. Now, I want to point out a very subtle but profound difference between dreaming in the day, we call it daydreaming, which results in wishful thinking, all right? And a distinction with everyday dreaming, which is basically goal setting. And Bob Proctor has helped us, God bless him. He passed on about 6 months ago, and he was one of my mentors. He helps us understand that there are at least 3 different kinds of goals we should be setting. And most people are setting incremental goals. Incremental goals are those that really deep down you believe you actually can do. Then you want to take a goal which is a reachable goal, according to the SMART definition, right? But maybe you're not quite sure when. But the real important goal to have is what's called a stretch goal, the third one, a C-type goal. So you got A, B, and C. C-type goals are what get us out of the bed in the morning, that drive us through the tough times. So imagination is a critical component to self-leadership. And that brings us on to learning. Now, learning is a disciplined pathway to knowledge. And here we need to pause and recognize clearly that there's a huge difference between having knowledge and applied knowledge. So I call it knowledge on the shelf, maybe potential knowledge, right? Facts and figures. But applied knowledge is really what we should be striving for, which means that a true leader is one who not only knows what to do, but also takes action. Now, learning is often spurred on by curiosity. And curiosity comes right up against fear. Now, best definition I've run into about fear is false evidence appearing real. And Tony Robbins says it best, is that if you have fear, and we all have fear, of course, this is a cortisone running in the body in terms of survival, but many of the fears and worries and anxiety that come up in modern times have nothing to do with the tiger around the corner or in the jungle facing us. Instead, it's a fear of failure. And failure has a social stigma. So my answer to that is develop the curiosity, feel the fear, but do it anyway. And that brings us on to number 4, which is be conscious. So consciously, deliberately work on expanding your self-awareness. And that means creating a balance between the frontal cortex of the brain, which is the logical, analytical part, and the subconscious part, which nobody really knows where it has a home, but it has something to do with the pineal gland inside the brain, the subconscious. Now, the goal here is to become self aware. I call it like going to the balcony when you're making a decision or in the middle of a negotiation. So you look down on yourself, you look down on how you're conducting your investigation or the negotiation, as well as the other counterparty. And ideally, here, reach a place that is not just brain focused, logic focused. And here, our deen, Islam, the virtues of Islam can help us, but we should be heart centered. So develop the consciousness of the heart. And here's a scientific fact I learned only recently. Maybe you're aware that the heart has over 40,000 neurons. Can you imagine that? 40,000 neurons in the heart, and it communicates with the brain up to 4 different channels, which, in the absence of that communication, the brain would not have the proper information about what's happening through the entire body. So, heart centered, and there are many references to this in the Holy Quran, which I commend to you, is something which is very much desirable for us to develop. And that brings us to a notion also, how do we get there? Well, it's 5 times prayer, right? And embracing silence. And that brings us on to the last component in self leadership, which is choice. Understand, and I think Albert Einstein said it best, that in fact, one of the most important decisions that we'll make in our entire lifetime is, do we believe that our universe is friendly or our universe is hostile? So discover as best you can, and there are some tools on the internet and also some capable people that can help you if you're having difficulty in figuring out, what is my purpose? Why am I here? Why has Allah chosen me to come at this moment in time? What am I here to do and to contribute to myself, to my family, to my community, and of course to the Ummah? And in this choice, keeping in mind the other 4 components, nurture the attributes of a leader. So this brings us to a new place, the cultivating of the conscious leadership. It brings you right on the threshold of the gateway to the 5th dimension. So you've heard of the 2 and the 3 dimensions, maybe even the 4th dimension. So what is the 5th dimension? Well, you can look it up in my book called Conscious Wealth. It's on Amazon. It's the guide to financial freedom. And quickly, what it is, I believe, is the collective consciousness of everyone who is living and everyone who has lived before. And that can be a source of inspiration coming down into us. Now, how does all this relate to conscious wealth? Well, first off, we should understand that there are 8 basic money functions. Each person has a dominant relationship with the thing we call money. I've come up with a game to help us learn about this, and I call it the money personality game. And there are 10 money personalities. So there's the guardian, there's the spendthrift, there's the builder, the philanthropist, there's the innocent idealist, and so on. Second, our relationship with money and wealth can be conscious, as we were just discussing, or it can be unconscious. What's the difference? Well, we need to look at the pattern of our familiar habits. Are we getting that latte every single day and then complaining we don't have any money to start a saving account? We need to be honest with ourselves. And it's encapsulated in a simple question you can ask yourself now or later is, does money control me or do I control my money? And believe me, today, with the rampant notion of debts, thinking that debt is good and more debt is better, often debtors find that money controls them. So I urge in my writings and in the talks that I give that people focus on saving. And then with the saving reservoir, you can start investing, which is the acceleration of your savings. Okay. Third, it's important to shift from financial literacy, which many of you probably have, which is the basics, to financial intelligence, which actually it takes study and a sustained effort, but it's available to everyone. Financial intelligence will enable you to be self-aware of healthy money habits, to develop your own sense of self-confidence about making money decisions, which requires learning the language of finance and creating some discipline around your money, perhaps budgeting, setting some financial goals, maybe figuring out what kind of a retirement nest egg you actually need. Most people, when you ask them, stop them in the street and ask them, so how much money are you going to need to retire? They don't have a clue. And this is, it's just making the job much tougher than if you know you need 2 million and the 2 million is going to enable you to retire, let's say at 42. Why wait to 65? This is a fallacy and something we can discuss on another talk. The third thing I would recommend is develop a prosperity mindset. And to help you, those of you that are interested, there's a link which the organizers can give you. I have a short PDF. It's free for those who have listened to this talk, again, either live now or in the replay, on how you can adopt prosperity thinking and, of course, what it is, but how you can make it yours. And the essence of prosperity thinking is to move away from scarcity thinking. Scarcity thinking says there's not enough, and I don't deserve money, and there's never going to be enough. That's scarcity thinking. Prosperity thinking is a lot closer to actually the messages in the Quran to all of us, which is there's a superabundance. It may not be in your hands, it may not be in your bank account, right? But it's there. It's there, the limitless possibilities. But it requires a plan. It requires getting up off the couch and getting some work done, maybe at your job, or maybe starting something you've always dreamed about. And lastly, and this is something I feel very passionate about, we want to focus on service to others, not just gathering the riches, gathering the piles of money for ourselves. And by the way, if you think about it, pause and think about it, where is the money that you want to earn? Where does it exist? You could say, well, it exists on the internet with Bitcoin. Okay. But more likely, the money you're seeking is already in the hands of somebody else who has a need that you could fulfill. So deliver value in whatever you do. And I built my life around something I call peak performance, which is consciously striving for excellence in everything I do and exceed expectations. So a final word is money is not wealth. Now pause and really reflect on that. What is money? Well, money is a resource. Money has no intrinsic value. Money amplifies who you already are. That's money. So what is wealth? Well, wealth are your gifts, your talents, the God-given skills and creativity, who you really are deep down, the beauty that you have inside, the fitness and health. What a blessing. That's wealth. Also, let's not forget spiritual capital, I call it, which is the accumulation of good deeds. And of course, there's also financial capital, which is financial assets and liabilities. And the last comment I'll make as I close is please understand there's a huge difference between net worth and self-worth. Don't ever allow your self-worth to be determined or linked to the difference between your assets and liabilities, which is the accounting definition of net worth. You're worth so much more to yourself, to your loved ones, to your community. You're worth so much more than your net worth. So there's no harm in accumulating riches as much as you want, but I would hope that from this talk you can take away some learnings about self-leadership and the virtues and benefits to you and others of conscious wealth. Thank you very much.
Dr. Fisher, that was brilliant. I wish I had heard this talk, 20, 25 years ago, or when I was still in college. It would have been brilliant, but it's never too late. I love the fact, the way you described, don't let your net worth dictate your self-worth, and also having that positive relationship with money. I happened to see a video by a very popular YouTuber. He has several 100,000 followers. He's Jewish, and he was talking about Jewish secrets of success, and he also spoke about having that positive relationship with money. And you brought Islam and the wealth mindset so beautifully. So really appreciated you joining us today, even though you just landed in Bahrain not too long ago. And we wish you the very best for your conference there, and look forward to continued interaction with D-Finance and with your other initiatives, inshallah.
Jazakallah khairan. All the best.
Thank you so
Continue
much.
with Halal Money Forum now and in the near future.
Thank you so much. So, all right, folks, we are now moving on to a very, very special part of the day. I was eagerly looking forward to this. In all the things I've done professionally, being part of an entrepreneur's life or doing something to help an entrepreneur, be it open doors or do something for their startup, and helping them in their dream, has probably been the most rewarding part of my whole career, right? And I had the good fortune of being involved with a few different entrepreneurs in different stages of their life and my life. And I recently got to know Junaid, who's the founder and CEO of Wahid. I call Junaid the Roger Bannister of the Islamic fintech world. He's on his way to building a unicorn if he hasn't already. They're doing some cool things. He has a global footprint. So today our fireside chat with him is about how he is on this journey of building a unicorn and the Wahid success story, right? He's founder and CEO of Wahid, doing great things in the Islamic fintech space. For those of you who don't know, I think Khabib Nurmagomedov is a very well-known Muslim athlete who's the world champion in UFC and in kickboxing. He has folks like Khabib and football legend Paul Pogba as the brand ambassadors for Wahid. And so without further ado, we'd love to begin this fireside chat. So please, if you want to, you can, stand up on your, you can get up, take a deep breath, stretch out or whatever. The next 40 minutes are going to be very exciting. Junaid is joining us from Dubai. It's fairly late for him. Really appreciate Junaid joining us. Thank you so much, Brother Junaid.
Assalamu alaikum, Tanveer. You're too kind. So thank you for all the kind words and the introduction. It really means a lot.
Hey, this is really special for me. I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit. So will it be okay if you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start from the beginning. So I'm Indian. Grew up in Bombay and moved to Dubai when I was around 9 years old, I believe it was. So finished schooling here. And then I went for my master's degree to New York, where I did industrial engineering. So people don't consider it a real engineering, but it was good. It was hard. And then I stayed there for a good few years, worked in merchant banking in New York itself, and then set up Wahid while I was there relatively early on. So I did everything a bit early. And I went for my master's degree when I was 19. I set up Wahid. I think I was 22 or 23 at the time. So everything a little too early on. It's been a while since then.
This is great. So originally from Mumbai and then New York. So I think Mumbai and New York, both financial capitals of the the world. And are you based now? Is London your home or Dubai your home? What is residence to you right now?
It's London right now, but I go wherever the work is, right? So we're launching, inshallah, now in the Middle East imminently, and that's why I'm spending a lot of time here. It's also my parents are based here still, and so I wanted to spend Eid with them. So I was here for that. And yeah, I'll be going back to London shortly.
And then this London has a phenomenal food scene and a phenomenal halal food scene. So I kind of envy that, And,
all the cities do. Yeah.
That's very, very nice. And so family, everyone is in London, right? So
yeah, we have quite a small family. So yeah.
So I'm very eager to know what prompted you to start Wahid.
Okay, quite there's many different things, right? Everyone usually has heard of the taxi driver story, but I'll go a bit more, holistic in why I thought of setting it up at the time. So my background, like I said, was very strong in math and engineering, but specifically focused on finance. So my undergraduate degree was actually accounting and finance, and then I had to have to do a lot more modules in engineering to be able to apply for the engineering masters. So I kind of did almost 2 degrees. And because I come from a practicing Muslim background, it's always about how do we apply this to Islam or Islamic finance? What does that mean? So I was always very interested in it. So even during my undergrad, I do all these side exams. So there used to be this diploma in Islamic finance by the CMA. So I did that. I did the CMA. I did the CAIA. I did the CFA 1-2 at the time. I did all the CPA. I just did everything I could find. Alhamdulillah. And very early on, right, I was doing these exams at like 17, 18, when a lot of times you couldn't even do it. So I had to find loopholes to be able to do it. So I had a strong finance background and then went deeper into the math of it because I thought it would be challenging, but I didn't want to become a quant. I wanted to go more front office. That's why I joined this merchant bank. And I also joined them because they had but they had exposure to Islamic finance. So they worked on structuring these sukuks. That was a bit of their skill set. They had presence in the Middle East. And so, I worked there early on. And I learned very quickly that I would not be too happy working in an investment bank or merchant bank. And that's because I would say every single deal had some debt element. And you just don't feel right about it, right? As Muslims, we're always a little conscious. There's not much you can do. And we all make excuses for dealing somehow in debt-based transactions, but you don't feel very good about it. So there was always that. The second thing is, you're around certain types of people, and we have to be very conscious around trying to be with good people, right, to better yourself. And I could see I was not going down a good path as a Muslim, and I was kind of going further away. You're very deep into your work around different types of people. And I felt I needed to really change course. And, because I was in finance and I was, in our little group of, you could say, friends or people I knew, I was the finance person. So they'd always, ask me about investing. What do we do with our money? And it's the usual question, right? Oh, I just got a job. Where do? I can't buy property. I'm not rich enough. I can't do debt. I can't do anything. And theoretically, at that time, it was possible to fractionalize shares, right? It had just started back then. This is like 8 years ago or 10 years ago, whatever it may be. And so theoretically, it was, look, I can just make this exact same diversified portfolio, get exposure to every asset class, because now you can fractionalize. It doesn't matter how much money you have. You can put $100 and get a fully diversified basket. You'll get the same mean variance optimization as someone with like $10 million, $20 million at JP Morgan, right? Probably more efficient. So I was thinking that, look, you just make this for the Muslim community, and this will solve that whole savings problem that we have. It was a nice thing, and it will help me go closer to what I was interested in, which is Islamic finance and all of that. So I took that leap. To be very honest with you, I was very naive. The naivety of youth. You were like, oh, how hard can it be, right? Throw up a website and launch an investment company. And oh my goodness, it was like, subhanAllah, I don't know how God opened so many doors, because if I knew what I know now and I was back, there's no way I would have done this, right? It's really, really hard to start a finance company. It's regulated. I remember filling out the SEC application myself, doing the draft, submitting it, getting like today, if you're applying for a regulatory license, you need lawyers, you need this. I was really silly back then, but alhamdulillah, we got the license. And, everyone was very, very supportive. And I had enough contacts back then. And, of course, the credibility of going to an Ivy League institution helps. And so, raised initial institutional kind of capital. One thing, that I kind of want to highlight is anytime I went to someone in our community saying, look, I'm doing this, they helped us. I mean, most of them, I'd say 10 out of 10 of them said, look, this is silly, it's not going to work. But I think you sign up for that, right, as an entrepreneur, because if they thought it would work, they would have done it. So they didn't think it would work, but they still helped you. And I think that's beautiful. And I hope that we all help, each other and new entrepreneurs, because we may think it's a silly idea, but we should still try and help them if we can. Especially if their intentions are good and it helps our community, inshallah. So yeah, we started there, launched in the US, a lot of good organic traction. Everyone had the same problem, especially in this younger age group. No one wants to write checks to a wealth manager. Wealth manager is not even going to give you time if you're 20 something years old and have like $10,000 in the bank. So it took on really well. Then we made this whole global plan, because everyone has the whole same problem globally. It turns out it's not an American thing. It's a Muslim thing, that nobody knows what to do to avoid riba. And in fact, I want to take a step back and explain like how it evolved into being a riba problem. So this was why it started and how it started. But as we learned more, it became a very deep-rooted mission of, okay, we have to solve this riba problem. We can't just keep putting our hands up and saying, oh, no one has a solution, dust of riba touches everyone, and go on with life. It doesn't work like that. We have, God's given us an education, he's given us resources, and it's an absolute responsibility to try and do what we can to try, to solve this problem. Now, let's take an average American Muslim, right? You have people who are savers, excess capital, and then you have the people in debt. Now, most people are actually in debt, manageable debt, because the biggest portion of debt is a mortgage, right? And a lot of Americans especially justify, having a mortgage as this thing. And then there's student loans, and then there's credit card debt. So that's the spectrum of your exposure to riba. So Wahid has become like a whole movement to solve this entire spectrum and say, okay, how do we minimize someone's exposure to riba? And that is all we care about. That's our North Star. You cannot solve the debt portions without solving the savings portion, because you have to accumulate that capital to actually solve these. At least theoretically, that's what we've come up with. So it takes time. I'm very impatient, but you can't really jump steps here. So we're doing the savings piece, and now we're slowly going into this piece, and then we'll push out. That's why we're launching our funds. Then there'll be an equity home product without touching debt. Now, we have to be very careful to understand how Islamic finance has evolved, and we're trying to push it even further, trying to, right? So inshallah, we call it mission impossible. It's a very hard task to do this in finance at a global scale, but that's what we're trying to do. So it keeps me very, challenged mentally, intellectually, keeps me very busy. So people have supported us. A lot of people who've joined us, right? Staff. Because keep in mind, I'm young, I have hardly any relevant exposure. People join us just because they care about this. So we had, for example, our chief investment officer, Samim. He was at Google before that JP Morgan. And he joined us as a client initially, and then he wrote to us saying, look, I can basically do your portfolios better than you. So and we're like, all right, then, do it. It's your responsibility too. We're managing Muslims' money. And so then he joined us. And this happened a lot. So if you see our team today, alhamdulillah, they're rock stars, right? And so we have people from top backgrounds. We just hired someone like in the last month, let's say, or this year, from Goldman Sachs Private Equity, from JP Morgan, from BlackRock, from these are top of conventional finance saying, you know what, I have a responsibility. And we need to figure this out together. No one of us is going to figure it out alone, and we have to try, right? And that's the main thing here, because alhamdulillah, our religion's so beautiful, we get rewarded for our intentions, right? It's not the result, who knows if we'll succeed or not, but we absolutely have to try. We can't just ignore that there's riba exposure in our lives, and it harms people. It's very harmful. How that relates to our company Wahid as well, and I'll tell you like a mini snippet of how alhamdulillah it kind of has saved us on many occasions. So preferred stock, right? Preferred stock is not halal. Liquidation preference, anti-dilution, just straight up not halal. We conveniently ignore it in the startup space, all right? A lot of Muslims in the startup space, no one wants to talk about it. Not halal, you can't touch it, okay? So you're like, oh, but everyone's like, yeah, but then what do we do? The whole startup space preferred stock. Not true. We have a fully common economic exposure cap table. We've raised more money than any Islamic startup, alhamdulillah. Was it hard? Yeah, much harder. We have no value investors because who's going to meet us if they're not going to be able to invest preferred stock? It's just the thing. So we've had to go to random pockets of money, family offices, quasi-sovereigns, because we say, look, we are keeping our kind of Sharia compliance and Islamic thing very, very strong. And we're not going to cut corners here. And that has saved us. So when, like today in the economy, I know entrepreneurs who are depressed, who are stressed out. The preferred stock has eaten into their equity, right? Because the way it works is basically the investor comes in with preferred, and if your valuation goes down, it kind of eats in, right? Because they don't want to lose. So now entrepreneurs are left with nothing after giving up 10, 20 years of their life. And Islamically, no, everyone should be equal. Just because I have money doesn't mean I get to bully you. We all have to be, on a similar footing in terms of economics. And it's such a beautiful thing. Because if I lose, they lose, and everyone's on the same ship, everyone's in it together. That, for me, was probably one of the hardest things in building Wahid, and still is to a certain extent. Imagine you have no access to institutional money. Who's going to invest in you without preferred stock? But subhanAllah, what ends up happening is they do. Because if your business is good enough, sure, they'll just add a bit of risk element in their calculations and then, go ahead with it. And alhamdulillah, that's really, really saved us. So like a word of, unsolicited advice is we need to be really careful with riba exposure in our lives because it's normalized and we don't talk about it and we don't care about it. And that's absolutely wrong. And we need to think about how we can help solve it because all of us have, alhamdulillah, we're in a very luxurious place. American Muslims are the highest level of demographic because we've done all these studies all over the world of, Muslims and their wealth and so on and so forth. Americans are the richest and most educated. If the American Muslims don't use their minds, like our minds, to solve this problem, who's going to solve it? It's a massive responsibility. Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent.
No, this is great. I wanted to ask you something for the benefit. A lot of people know Wahid. I saw some great comments about an early user in Wahid and loves the features you spoke about. But for the benefit of those who are not familiar with Wahid, could you take a minute or two and tell them, who you guys are, what you do? I think that would be super powerful.
Okay, so Wahid is a finance company, you could say broadly. It started off as an investing app. So we're fully digital. And we help people keep their savings or invest their savings, right, in diversified portfolios. Or at least that's what it started as. Now you have a whole suite of products that, it's very interesting and very sad. So we started in America, we built the prototype, and then we didn't work on that prototype for like years. And then we went all over the world and did the coolest things. And it was because we had to migrate the whole tech stack to the new tech stack. But now that's done. So now we have a rock star US team. And this year is going to be like ridiculous, the things we push out, inshallah. So that whole spectrum of products are going to be coming out with a bang. And we started off as an investment company, but are going into, firstly, the broader suite of investments. So, alternatives and so on and so forth. But then also to solve the other problems. So how do you solve the real estate problem? By actually investing in people's houses, right? Pure equity solutions. You have that in America, but actually building this ecosystem out and applying specific products to solve the entire riba problem. Then a micro waqf, right? So we're adding now in the UK, inshallah, soon in the US, like your own little waqf on your app. Because otherwise you have to be rich to have your own endowment or donor advised fund or whatever it is in America. But here it makes it easy and brings back the culture of waqf. So, Islam is so beautiful in terms of economics. There's so much done here, right, in the past, historically, with our, Muslim leaders and cultures. But for some reason, we haven't applied it. So we're going to try, inshallah, and, bring it back, all these cool things.
So this is great. Thank you for that. Now, as a successful startup entrepreneur, and we know how difficult it is to, launch a startup and then get product market fit and all of that, right? I actually had a two-part question because you said you started in the US when others. Did most of your growth come from US or was it from the Middle East? Or what is that market where you felt you got the most traction, Junaid, in your
Okay, so we started in the US, got a lot of traction, went to the UK, launched in the UK. UK was a disaster initially, okay? So we thought it would be like the US. It's the complete opposite. Oh my goodness. So the Muslim community in the US is the lowest of the economic spectrum, right? So it's our fault because we look at data. So you look at the UK data, wealth per capita is high, financial literacy is high, similar to the US, but not the Muslim community. There's nuances, and no one has data on this. So we had to learn the hard way. So we went, and then we had to complete. There's like trust issues basically in the Muslim community in the UK. So we had to fix that, and now, alhamdulillah, UK is actually on par, if not more successful than the US. Then we launched Malaysia. Malaysia, we were like, there's no way it's going to work here because you have 15 Islamic banks. Why does anyone even need us? And so we launched very, reluctantly in Malaysia, and it just flew. It took off. So in the first year, we passed 100,000 clients in Malaysia. We serve over 1% of the population of Malaysia. 1 in 100 people keeps their money with Wahid. It's insane at this point. And mainly the youth, right? And the reason is because we were like, why? They have Islamic banks. Why are they even, worrying about this? Turns out the youth do not trust Islamic banks as being Sharia compliant. That's a whole different discussion. I don't want to go there. But basically, they're like, look, lending institution, I don't understand the difference. This is genuine investment. It goes up and down. I know it's Sharia compliant. And that's a beautiful thing because the lower, income demographic you go, the more they care about riba and Sharia. And it's a beautiful thing. The wealthy care less for some odd reason. We're all trying to maximize our expected return and leveraging up. And then the second reason was because we got people from rural areas, like literally villages and stuff, because they have mobile phones, but no bank cares about going and offering investment products to random villages or having branches there. So it just flew in Malaysia. So it worked in the US, worked in the UK, worked in Malaysia. And then we had to take a breather because, it's not easy to build a global financial institution. Obviously, we thought it's easy because, we're silly and young, but a lot of challenges. And then, so we really had to put our head down, structure everything. And today we're like super efficient, super strong. Our tech stack is built beautifully. It's clean. So now we're finally slowly starting to launch countries again. So we're doing the Middle East now, inshallah, imminently. And I consider the Middle East home turf. So we're very strong here. It should be good. And then when you accumulate this capital from these wealthier countries or in general, then you can start deploying and solving, the harder problems. What we do in Islamic finance, unfortunately, is we always start with the how do I solve for loans, and in my mind it's impossible to solve for loans without actually accumulating capital. It just doesn't work, and that's why there's such a big gray area, right, in Islamic finance. At the end of the day, everyone's scared it's the same thing.
The next question I want to ask is that the reason I asked, hey, where do you see the growth, right? Now, there's two ways to look at it. There's an enormous, if you look at it globally, there's this humongous Muslim population that's going to, there's globally, big picture, macro, great opportunity. But if a fintech entrepreneur wants to launch an Islamic fintech startup, right? Yeah. Would it make sense to start it in the US where there's all this innovation happening and then go global? Or will it be better in today's times to start in Dubai, for example, and then go global? Is there a general answer to that, or that maybe too like?
So most people would be diplomatic about this, but I'll just tell you very honestly how it is. Different countries have different regulatory cultures, different laws, different ways of doing things. So if I were to do this again, I would absolutely start in the US, and I'll tell you why. The two main reasons is one, the credibility. America has credibility. It is a very mature, old jurisdiction. They know what they're doing. They're on top of it. The SEC is an A-list regulator. If you can have your firm be efficient enough to be satisfied, the SEC satisfied with you, then you're good to go. And everyone else respects that. Every other regulator respects that. UK is a bit slower, but they get there eventually. Very efficient, very good. You also have that credibility. There's no Islamic country we've worked with that is anywhere close to as efficient as a Western regulator. Like they're not even close. And that's the truth of it. So you can go there, but go there after the US, because then they'll be like, oh, I mean, if the America's okay with it, then it should be fine. But that's unfortunately where the Islamic countries are. I'm not naming specific Islamic countries, but we're licensed basically in like 10 jurisdictions. We've dealt with every regulator, right? So, and also different countries have different reputations. And America still has a very good reputation in terms of financial services, AML, so on and so forth. Islamic countries, again, a bit of a gray area. So if we started Wahid in the Middle East or in an Islamic country in general, there is absolutely no way we would have come so far. There's no way. Even with investors take comfort. Even Muslim investors and people from these regions prefer that we're American, because they know there's a strong judiciary and there's enforcement and judgment, and then that gives everyone peace and security, and it holds us to a higher level. We see fintechs who run in only Islamic countries, and they don't even touch the corporate governance that you have to be functioning as a financial services firm in America or in Europe. So hands down, a Western world.
So this is great feedback. My concern, Brother Junaid, was now I'm assuming there's, and you probably have more data, right? There's some interesting points, but I do have some concerns too. On the positive side, I was at a conference, the Open Forum, a couple of years ago, and a fintech entrepreneur said that he estimates there's like $20 billion of money lying around in Muslim savings accounts, right? They don't want to, make interest or whatever, so the money's just lying in savings accounts, and 20 billion is not a small sum. But at the same time, you look, there's probably 1 million Muslim households you could market to. So it's not like, you're doing a fintech startup, and Islamic fintech, it becomes a very small market in North America. I just want to get this is where I want to delve a little deeper and to say that, hey, from the VC point of view, like, hey, is there $100 million opportunity here, right? I mean, for them to invest in all of that, right? So just want to get your thoughts there, and then we'll move on to other questions.
Right. So firstly, it depends what you're solving for, right? Are you solving purely for money? When it's then it's a very different discussion. Or are you solving because you want to try and have two things solved, which is actually help our community or solve some sort of greater problem, and also try to make money as a for-profit institution. For us, we're trying to do both. It's very hard. There's a lot of we have to sometimes make decisions where everyone's not very happy. But let's say you're solving only for money, right? America's probably the best place to do it. It's the highest margins that we've people have money. The wealth per capita is significantly higher than literally anywhere else in the world, unless you pick like a weird city like Monaco or something. It's just really high. Now, the issue isn't actually with the Muslim numbers. Muslim numbers are ridiculously large, and you don't need that many clients to make money. The issue is awareness of riba or Islamic finance in general in our community. So there was a survey done by a Middle Eastern Islamic finance institution, and they commissioned one of these big consultancies to do it, and they shared it with me verbally. And the findings were 10% of practicing Muslims, 10% care about staying away from interest. Care enough where they'll only use an Islamic bank. And that's in an Islamic country or an Islamic institution where you have access to it. Only 10% of us care about staying away from interest.
In an Islamic market or in the Western?
In an Islamic market, but amongst Muslims, this is practice. Like they surveyed, practicing Muslims. They had a thing about how often do you pray and stuff like that, right? So this is practicing Muslim. 50% said that if all else is equal, I'll choose the Islamic option because it helps me sleep at night. And then the remaining said, I don't care. So that's the issue. It's not, are there enough Muslims? It doesn't matter how many Muslims, there's more than enough Muslims. And we have like 5 kids each, like it's an unlimited population, right? The issue is awareness. We feel it's not a serious thing. Everyone is shaming the guy who drinks or the guy who's, like we love pointing fingers at people in our community, but who isn't dealing in riba? Our mosques are keeping money at a lending institution happily. Like all our zakat institutions, no one thinks about it, no one cares about it, no one asks. I meet like a lot of people, a lot. Everyone's very happy. Nobody has asked me, Junaid, how can I stay away from riba? Just tell me, like, is there a solution to it? You know what's interesting, Tanveer Bhai? There are solutions to it. You can, if you actually care enough. Nobody cares. It's really messed up. So if you think about it, right, let's say about what we all care about, alcohol, right? Everyone likes to talk about that. Imagine there's no water, and this is a super theoretical example. You wake up every morning and you can only drink alcohol. Breakfast, whiskey. You'd feel dirty as a Muslim. How do you pray? You'll feel so bad. You'll be asking God for forgiveness the whole time. And you'd message everyone in your WhatsApp group, your GM community, hey man, do you have water? Do you know where I can find some water? Eventually, you'll be like, you know what? I can't live in this country as a Muslim. I don't feel good. I'll move. Like literally, I'm drinking alcohol every single day. That's how you'd feel. You'd feel dirty. Why don't we feel this about riba? It's a worse sin. It's a much worse sin. It makes the poor poorer and the rich richer, and we can see it and we can prove it in economics. There's no ambiguity here. So like humans have such a love for money that we ignore all this stuff and we don't care, and it's very sad. So the issue is not the numbers. The issue with Islamic finance is we have ourselves to, we're not looking, we're not trying. If we took it as seriously as we should, everyone would apply their skill sets to help solve the problem. And we'd solve it in like one day. Honestly, there's more than enough money. We've done the numbers in the Muslim community, but we're just keeping it in the wrong places, using it in the wrong places. If we used our brains and our money to solve the riba problem, it would be solved tomorrow. It's like more than enough. And that's the, like you can tell, like, it's infuriating. It's just very sad, you know?
No, I see the passion, and you are spot on, Brother Junaid, because I personally feel also many of the ills in society, a lot of the wars would not have happened if this interest wasn't there in our societies, right? I think a lot of the big financiers sometimes will fund both sides of a war and make money because it's the interest that drives them, right? There was many years ago I read
we don't have to. Sorry.
No, sorry, you go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was saying that, you know, sometimes we also don't have to justify everything, right? There's rules. God said it's haram. God's smarter than we are. I have a lot of, you know, student intellectuals in economics, business people, especially rich people. It's, oh, you know, Junaid, the inflation, so I can take up to inflation, you know, no harm. And then if you go deep enough in economics, eventually they themselves are like, oh man, this doesn't actually make sense because the bank isn't the government. I'm not getting, you know, it's an intermediary. So the credit card guys are paying 40%, and then the rich guys are paying below inflation, making free money. And that spectrum of inequality is created with my money. I'm creating inequality. And then they're like, oh man, now what do I do, right? So sometimes the issue is us trying to use our brains. God's written it for us in simple language. All we have to do is follow it and not trying to act like, you know, I love the American education system, right? That we all have been a part of, where it's critical thinking and we ask questions. Great. But I think when it comes to this, it's hurts us a little bit. Sometimes we just have to trust, riba is haram, stay away from it. Let's not try to justify it with 100 different things.
No, this is great. And again, I would love to see you do a keynote for us when we, you know, have a bigger conference. And yeah, this is great for people to hear, right? So thank you for covering that. I want to switch gears a little bit, and then towards the end, we'll try to take a couple of questions. A few, you know, great questions have popped up from the audience. Within your entrepreneurship journey, this is a two-part question. What were some of the biggest challenges you had to overcome? And then the second part is, were there moments when you wanted to throw the towel, right? Because it's not easy doing a startup, especially in Islamic fintech. Were there moments where you felt, man, I should throw the towel, and what kept you going?
Right. So, you know, in most startups, the key is capital, right? Whether we like it or not, it's access to fundraising. That's everyone's issue. It'll always be everyone's issue. And other communities have abundant sources of capital to allow people to try to fail many times until there's a solution. We don't, and I'll tell you why we don't. For us, it's been one source of capital and a very hard source of capital because we can't go to the regular VC or institutions. We can't take preferred stock. There's many practicing Muslims in the VC ecosystem that we know that say, look, Junaid, we understand, but you know, everyone does preferred stock, so we can't do comment. And so how are we going to help our entrepreneurs if we can't even solve the first basic issue of capital? We're uniquely placed, where we're, you know, weirdly well connected and have, alhamdulillah, massive sources of capital where we can try to do this. We're not brilliant. There's a lot of people smarter than us, more hardworking than us, but they have no capital. Muslim entrepreneurs. And we together have to solve it. So many rich Muslim people, you know, it's, oh, I invest in tech, but I only invest in what, like the Sequoia invest in whatever. And sure, that's great and it's smart, but that's preferred stock, man. Like, what are the guys who are actually solving our problems going to do? So we have to solve that together. And, you know, you were mentioning you're having some, you know, conference and that to connect entrepreneurs with investors. Everyone needs to understand that if we're doing something as Muslims, it's okay to mention that it's wrong. Would you do a conference if people are like dealing in alcohol and Heineken's the sponsor? And you would never do it. So why are we okay with doing it with riba institutions, with preferred stock? I don't know why we all just ignore the money and the riba element. right? So that has been the hardest, and inshallah we're trying to solve it. So today, out of our, let's say 330 or whatever thousand clients, ridiculous amounts today, 10% are high net worth, right? And they want a liquid deal flow. So we made this subsidiary called Wahed X, and we're applying for the licenses now in the US and Malaysia. Inshallah comes through, where we can connect Muslim entrepreneurs with these high net worths to fundraise for them. And the initial tests have been super successful, like super successful. So we did a trial group of like 300 investors, and we're funding people like $500,000. We have access to 30,000 on the app. Here's a new deal. We do the due diligence. We curated 1-2 deals. Like you'd be able to fund everyone in perpetuity with our own community's money, right? So it's these sort of, we can't wait for someone else to solve our problems, basically. We have to try and do it. And then inshallah, they'll kind of, pay it forward. It can be done. We have more than enough money. I just feel we're keeping it in the wrong places, right?
This is awesome, and I'm going to come to that in a second. Greatly appreciate what you're doing at Wahed X. When we had our intro call, I did mention we are planning to do like a fintech week and bring entrepreneurs and connect them with investors. And you were kind enough to introduce me to your executives at Wahed X, and I will follow up with them. It'll be great to have further, some collaboration in that area, and I'll follow up with you and your colleagues in the near future, inshallah. The second part I want to ask within your entrepreneurship journey, when things were really hard, what kept you going and not throw in the towel?
So I like to be very, very frank and honest. Like I come from a very privileged background, so I have that safety net where I can go all in. So there have been many points in our startup journey where it's almost like it's just end of the road, right? And you just keep on going because, alhamdulillah, I have the ability to not worry about where my food's going to come from or where my rent's going to be. But a lot of people have those worries, so we need to support them. And so, for us, it's become, again, more than a money thing. It's a lot more than a money thing. At this point, we are positioned to make a difference, and there is no way we can stop now, because imagine the impact that Wahed could make, right? With so much money we've aggregated, so much. We have like licenses in the biggest Muslim countries in the world, India, Indonesia, Nigeria. We can go launch the whole world, aggregate that money, use it for the benefit of Muslims. Who else is there? 8 years. Where's the competition? It's really sad. And I'm not saying like, because we're so good, there's no competition. I'm saying we want competition. Wahed X funds our competitors. It's really weird. Yeah, but if we are genuine about our intention, and that's all that actually matters in the end, then we should be supporting each other, right? And at a very efficient level, obviously, we shouldn't just not compete. But I really hope that we support the Muslim entrepreneur, even though it looks like a worse business model than because this is something we have to solve, like genuinely for all of us, right? And again, nobody realizes how harsh riba is as a sin for us. It's written as you're at war with God and the Prophet, peace be upon him. If you deal in riba, and we have to solve it. There's no other sin that's described like that in the Quran, right? It's a very harsh thing, and we need to be afraid of it, and we need to think about it, and we need to stop making ridiculous justifications for dealing with riba, especially if we're well off. And again, a lot of people, especially the Muslim community in America, is well off, very well educated. You don't need that bigger house or that bigger thing or the car loan for your Rolls Royce. We have to solve this problem for the whole world. And inshallah, you have two savings accounts, like two portfolios, right? And that's why we're in our app, we're making these two portfolios. So one is like your Wahed portfolio for the dunya, where you save and you grow your money. And then there's your Waqf portfolio, which is like your Akhirah portfolio. You have to worry about both. There's not just one, right? This isn't going to transfer forward after you die. And I think if we're in a place where we can try and do something for this cause specifically, we absolutely should. And because there's so many Muslims, and because there's so much money, and because there's so much opportunity, it also makes economic sense. There's no reason why it can't be a for-profit institution. And it's our responsibility to help people. So if someone wants to take that leap, there is no way someone can not help you if you come with a potential solution for riba, inshallah.
This is great. Your passion is contagious. Before we do Q&A, I'm very keen to ask you this: how did that, Khabib and Pogba, how did that materialize? He's such a, I think Khabib, I think his famous line when he was fighting McGregor, right? Conor McGregor, I will smash your boy, right? I think that is legend. To have such an elite athlete being involved actively, and I think he's also investing in startups, I think. So how did that relationship happen?
So a few different things. So firstly, it's very weird to say, but I actually never watched sports and didn't watch. I saw that one Khabib McGregor fight. I think everyone did, but I don't usually watch sports, right? So as Wahid, as a brand in retail financial services or any B2C kind of company, you need brand awareness. And so we felt, we identified the top brand ambassadors in the world for us, and Khabib and Pogba both hit different demographics and different geographies, and we're both fitting our brand very, very well. So, the excellence, the humility, the respect and reputation, and it's very hard to find someone that hits, and they're both A-list, right? So, alhamdulillah, with God's grace, someone in our network knew them. And in fact, it's come to a point, it's our network, alhamdulillah, is so ridiculously strong and large that it's literally, we message our shareholders, someone knows everyone, like anyone. And again, they're only our shareholders because they actually care. Like, these guys have a lot of better, more exciting opportunities, right? So we asked one of our stakeholders, they knew Khabib, connected us, and Khabib met me, and then he's like, you know what? I've been trying to solve this riba problem back home in Dagestan. He has his own Islamic finance company. He's trying to solve it. He doesn't know how. So he's like, it's my responsibility. I have to do it. Pogba, we went to see him to be an ambassador. Pogba understood everything. He's like, Junaid, I come, from there, this background, and I have this issue. I don't know what to do with my money, but I have too much money. So can I become a shareholder? You don't pay me. He ended up paying us. We didn't pay him. So he's a shareholder. And these people care. Tanvir, they care. Like, they come to us with ideas. They go out of the way. They introduce us to people. It's not a normal ambassador. They don't to help solve this problem. They see it as a responsibility, as do we. And it's very important for people to understand that an institution, when it attaches itself to something to do with Islam, like we have, it kind of goes beyond us, right? We're not perfect, but the institution's trying to do something good, and we have a huge responsibility when you have this, attachment to Islam, where the clients trust you because of it. It's massive, and we have to be very, very careful. And so these ambassadors, they have that those ethics and that humility, and they care as much as we do. They genuinely care. It's lovely to see. So that's how we kind of got involved with them. So far we've never had any issues.
That's very cool. Now, I wish we had more time, but I need to start wrapping up. Junaid, a couple of questions. There's great feedback, a lot of positive comments. One of the members, one of the audience asked, and you could maybe touch base on this quickly. What's the difference between the HLAL versus other halal ETFs?
So in North America, we were the first ETF, okay? We saw mutual funds expensive, inefficient, passive beta active, right? Theoretically, we launched the ETF. Everyone got their price down. HSBC launched a suite of ETFs, a lot of new ETFs. Our job was done. We brought efficiency to the market. Today, we're a 5-star rated fund. We have the most AUM, outperformed the index consistently. We're very, very happy with it. Difference between another fund, it would depend which fund it is, right? Maybe you're tracking a different index. I don't know what asset class it is, so on and so forth. But we did our job. When we went saying we're going to list an ETF, every single person, not going to work, not going to work. Someone launched an ETF, it failed. Not going to work, never going to work. Alhamdulillah, it worked. So now the whole industry brought the price down. BlackRock lowered the price of their ETFs. HSBC lowered their price. And that's beautiful for us because the community wins, right? So whether the AUM comes to us or not, I mean, God will take care of us. But it's so nice to see that we can slowly push the boundaries of efficiency, because everyone says, oh, because the Sharia compliance is more expensive, we have to pay this, we have to pay that. No, it's not true. It's the same. We're just inefficient. We just need to work better. There's no extra expense.
That's cool. Appreciate you answering that.
Yeah.
Another question, any plans of launching a 529 product?
I honestly don't know what that is. I'll have to ask our America team. Is it like one of those tax things for college?
Yeah, I myself not familiar.
I'm sure they have it in the roadmap.
Savings, I'm thinking. Yeah. We'll find
Well,
ways to get some of these questions answered that we can.
I'm sure they are. Each country now has its own PM and they have a wish list, so they're just working their way down. So in America, they're actually working on insane products. So that's probably taking up a lot of time. Like they're working on this, digital bank and cool stuff like that. So that in Wahid X and everything. But I'm sure it's on the wish list somewhere. There was also a question about that if we surveyed women, it would be different. Now, what's very interesting is we've seen a massive reception from women. And it's, even when we go to events, our team tell us, like, after you say something, women, understand, they trust, and they put their money where their mouth is. But the guys will come and argue with you for 1 hour. Oh, my crypto makes more money. I can do this. I can do that. I know better. And it's very interesting, right? And so you're right. The survey results would probably be different. Right now, we don't actually collect gender on survey results, but we should do that. It might be different.
No, and that came from Sister Reshma, who's very active. She does amazing things here in the Bay Area with Open and with the Entrepreneurship Club that she runs. There was one question that I think he's really looking for clarification is, who has certified you as Sharia compliant, and was probably trying to get a better sense of the differentiating factors. Maybe in interest of time, if folks want to learn more about Wahid, is it very go get the information yourself on a website, or can they actually talk to a financial advisor, a real person? How can they engage with
whatever they prefer? We have a website. They can contact support. We have US personnel as well. They're really friendly guys. We have California and New York coverage right now for in-person. But yeah, whatever they prefer. I can quickly go through the questions if you prefer.
Sure, if you can do that, that'll be great. Yeah, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, some are questions, some are not.
A couple you've already addressed.
Yeah. So, I actually didn't answer the Sharia thing. So basically, we have an independent Sharia body, Sharia Review Bureau. They're based out of Bahrain, who have appointed 3 scholars as a Sharia board. So they make sure every single thing. And by every single thing, most people have their portfolio certified Sharia compliant. That's the norm. Okay, they get a certificate. Our whole group is Sharia compliant. Again, our cap table, every legal contract we get into. Now, here's what's interesting. A lot of times, our Sharia boards just, don't know what a business is up to, right? Or they certify what we give them. We care about Sharia compliance. I have to answer to God. We have to answer to God. The responsibility is massive. So there have been instances genuinely where the Sharia board's okay with it and we're not. And we say no. Preferred stock's one of them. Sharia board said, look, it's we can give you an exemption. It's normal. Everyone gets exemptions. We're like, no, man. If it's not okay, it's not okay. We'll figure it out. So you have that independent audit. You have the certificate on the website, but we have a responsibility, and inshallah, we'll stay true to that. And we're very strict about that.
Phenomenal. So, Junaid, I've had the pleasure of doing fireside conversations with many entrepreneurs. This one is at the top of my list. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Loved your passion. It's a great story. We have nothing but the best wishes for you, your family, the whole team at Wahid. We will be rooting for your success, and I would love to be in touch with you. Can't wait to meet you in person in the future, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so much, Tanveer.
Once again, thank you for joining us. It's late in Dubai. It was greatly appreciated. A lot of great positive feedback, and this is personally very inspiring for me too, and it strengthens my conviction that hey, I'm investing the time rightly and by everything we are doing with the halal money for it.
No, you definitely are, and that's why I felt it a responsibility, to come on and accept your invitation. So thank you.
It's greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. All right, you take care.
Yeah, salam.
So, alhamdulillah, great event, folks. That was a phenomenal discussion, and like I said, I wish we had more time, but we will do our best to bring Junaid back for a future event and other entrepreneurs like him who have that kind of a passion and contributing to the Islamic fintech space. We are more than halfway into the session. And I think we have three topics coming up. The next is a name that is very, very familiar to most people in the Muslim community because of their many years of service, decades of service, and that is Saturna Financial and Amana Mutual Funds, right? And we have with us an executive from Saturna, Owais Dadabhoy, will be joining us. Owais is very active throughout the country, right? He's always on the road, going to local masjids, going for Muslim community events, whether it is CARE, ICNA, ISNA. He's in the Bay Area a lot, meeting with Google and Apple, and probably one of the best brand ambassadors they have, for this company and for all of Islamic fintech. I had the pleasure of hosting him for a fireside conversation. He did a beautiful workshop at our Halal Money Expo on retirement planning, and that was very well received. So, Owais, pleasure to have you back. Your topic is very interesting, and thank you for suggesting that topic. Time in the market versus timing the market. With that, I'd like to turn it over to you, and can't wait to seek your wisdom.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you, Tanvir. That was great listening to Junaid and Tanvir's conversation. I'm always happy to listen to these conversations. It's quite interesting, and you get to learn a little bit more about each person. So thank you for doing that. My name is Owais Dadabhoy, and I am the president of Saturna Trust Company and the director of Islamic investing for Saturna Capital. Amana was a startup back in 1986, right? Speaking of startups, it was a startup back in 1986 and was started by Dr. Mirza and Iqbal Yunus and Dr. Jamal, amongst others. And modern day, we're managing about 6.5 billion in assets, mostly in America, but also in Malaysia. And we've launched in the UK as well. So we're going to be doing work in Europe. And so it's a tried, true, and tested, set of funds. The first one was started in 86, the next in 94, and we've added 2 others after that as well. It's all based on Islamic principles of investing. And we do have an outside company that reviews all of our portfolios every quarter. They're named Amani Advisors in Malaysia, since that question came up before. I joined this company back in 2008. I used to work at Wells Fargo Bank and then Wells Fargo Investments. And, I had heard a khutbah years ago, and it was talking about how to get out of the riba system. And there wasn't really a lot of talk about that. So when this khatib came all the way to Southern California from New Jersey, I went and talked to him afterwards, and I said, I work at a company that deals with this all day long. And he said, make your intention and try to look for a company that you can go work for. And so it took some time, but, I seeked out a company that was the largest one in its field. I didn't want to go into financing. I wanted to go and stay in investing. So fortunately, I was able to land at Amana Mutual Funds, which is managed by Saturna Capital. So the Amana funds were launched by these Muslim businessmen, and Saturna Capital was asked to be created, actually, because they went to the founder of another company and asked him to start this one to manage the Amana Mutual Fund. So that's where we stand today. This particular topic I'm going to talk to you about, I think it's timely because a lot of emotions get in the way, especially when the markets go down. And in 2022, the markets were down. But you could apply this to other types of investing as well. The housing market. I don't know about crypto because there hasn't been enough studies done yet about long-term returns and, how if you time the market, can you time the market, or how that would work. So let's begin and start talking a little bit about, the details of this. And I'm going to go through it rather quickly so you can start asking your questions, and hopefully we can get to them at the end, inshallah. So Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Anytime we talk about investments, because I will talk about the funds just a little bit, we want you to keep in mind there's not an ever-growing upward market, right? So you have to consider your, risk, charges, objectives, and expenses, and everything on any investment that you make. And I, of course, myself and others, maybe Junaid as well, have horror stories that we can tell you about what has happened with people when they've jumped into something without really looking at the full picture. So what is market timing, and why are we talking about it today? It is a type of strategy, right? So some people will actually employ this as a strategy. And so they're looking to say, how can I jump into the market at this time and then jump out at the right time? And, you're going to be jumping in and out of a particular financial market or individual stocks. And, some people believe that this is the way to go, but there's reasons why you wouldn't want to do it as well. So they believe that it is impossible, right? The professionals believe it's impossible, but individuals and even some money managers believe that it's possible. But, we're going to take a look at the actual numbers. And, we're not able to predict the future, as you know. and it bears out every single time. Like you're going to find in 2008, the stock market was down something like 40%, right? And the next year it was up significantly, but people were jumping out in 2008 and 2009, not knowing what was to come. And the same thing happened when COVID first hit, and people started to jump out of the markets. And that year was a great year, and I'm going to show you the numbers on that. What else happened? I think back in the tech bubble and 2001, I remember personal stories of people asking me, where I used to work before, employees asking me, should I jump out of the market? I'm going to retire in a couple of years. And I implored them to stay, but I remember one of them didn't, and basically lost her shirt, and unfortunately was not able to recover, and probably did not have the type of investment return and retirement account that she had envisioned. So the average investor does not want to spend hours watching the market, and that's true for all of us. Probably on this meeting today. And if you continue to transact on a regular basis, it could get expensive unless you have some type of really great deal. And regardless of that, though, you most likely are going to have some type of capital gains taxes. So, transacting on a regular basis is not a worry-free or an expense-free way to do things. If you look at the overall bull markets, the average time of this is over 7 years, right? So after 2008, 2009 was a great year. We had years of upward movement, and maybe there was 1 year out of 12 or so that was down, or maybe 2, but the overwhelming amount of time it was a bull market. And so when you compare that to the bear market, which to all of us, when we're looking at it emotionally, it might feel like bear markets are longer, because that's when you feel anxious and you're looking at getting out, when stocks that you have gone that you have ridden up in value are now starting to come down. And when I'm talking about staying in something, it doesn't mean that you stay in investments that you haven't taken educated risk in, right? I'm talking about educated risk that you're taking in good companies or good funds. So the average time of a bear market is 13 months. And the average downside is 42% at that time. But the bull market gives you a 403% return, historically speaking. Now, if you look at how long or how often these types of negative returns come into a market, since 1970 to 2020, every 10 months you'll have a negative 5%. And we've seen this, right? This happens over and over again. These numbers, again, are through 2020. So the last occurrence during that time was August 2019. But basically, every year you're going to have at least a 5% down time during the year. You're going to go down 15% every 4 years. And more than 15% is going to be, the last time was 2018, December 2018. And you're going to go down 20% or more every 8 years. But the beautiful thing is the S&P 500 since 1928 has been up at the end of the year 72.2% of the time. So, that's 3 out of every 4 years. Again, which years are you going to be out of the market? The other thing about jumping out of the market is people have a hard time jumping back in, because they're looking at, I jumped out at this point, the market has gone up to this point, I have to wait for it to come back down again. And so they really miss the boat. So some other, explanations here. If you're looking at the market every single day, you're going to see 54% of the times it's up and 46% of the time it's down, if you're looking every single day. But if you're looking at it every month, once a month, at the end of each month, since this 50-year period that we're looking at here, basically, what is it, like 2/3 of the time, 63%, you're going to see that you're up in that particular, the market was up in that particular month. If you look at it every year, at the end of each year, you're up from this period of time 80%. And then, if you look at the 10-year numbers, 5 and 10 years, they're basically about the same. 9 out of 10 5 and 10-year periods that you would look at have been up. So, do you really want to be out of the market? Okay, so this tells you a little bit about the S&P 500 returns. So you can see that, it was slow moving from 70 to 85, and then, it started to make a good push up until 2000. Then you had the dot-com bubble. But you had some really, really difficult times: the energy crisis, Black Monday, .com, in 2008, the global financial crisis, right? And then COVID-19 had the temporary setback as well. So if you were looking at this on a daily basis or monthly basis during this period of time, you might be very unhappy. You might be getting sick to your stomach. But if you would have stayed invested for a long period of time, you would have done extremely well. And this is what this graph is trying to tell you. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have dramatic ups and downs. But the main thing is, if you've taken on educated risk of the market, then you want to stay invested. All right. If you would have stayed invested from 1928 again down to 2020 in every day that you were invested, right? And none of us have been investing since 1928. But this is, of course, just a long-term horizon. So, that way we're not cherry picking any times. We're going all the way back to when the S&P 500 started in 1928. If you would have stayed invested and put in $1,000 back then, you would have had $211,000 at the end of 2020. But most likely you were adding more money and you would have a lot more. But the point of this slide is, if you would have taken the 5 best days of the market and the 5 worst days of the market and tried to time it, and you missed those days, 5 best and 5 worst, your return would be at about 198,000. So you lost a little bit. But if you go down all the way to missing the 10 best days because you just timed it wrong, look what it does to your return. What if you just missed the 5 best days? Your return is about half. So again, trying to put it in our minds that, historically speaking, if you're going to even miss the best days and the worst days together, it's going to, the timing is not going to work for you. It's better to stay in the market over the period of time. So from 1991 until 2020, if you look at the S&P 500 returns, there's all 500 companies, of course, in that particular index, and that changes, quite regularly, actually, right? They move companies in and out. Take a look at the squiggly line, right? You would have had a lot of ups and downs and pain and heartache, but also a lot of wins. And if you would have looked at the graph on a regular basis, you would have gotten sick to your stomach again. But at the end result, it was what you're looking at. So if you have a long, your goal is, a long-term one: retirement, education for your children. When they're born, you put money aside, and now you have, 18 years later, you get to your goal and you get to pay for school without having to write a check from your checking account. Those are things that you can put aside for the long term. And the squiggly line tells you that it's dramatic on a regular basis, but at the end of it, during long periods of time, you end up with success. And this is 10,000 invested over a period of about 30 years. This particular one shows you, and I really like this because this tells you in a particular year here what the maximum negative was and then what happened at the end of the year. So if you look back at 2020, this was the year that we had COVID introduced in the beginning of the year. There was a time during that year that the overall market, the S&P 500, was down 34%, but it ended at up 18%. If you look at 2008, at one point it was down 48% and it ended up down 37%. And you can see the rest of the years, what has happened along the way. So even if you're seeing a particular year that you're down 20%, you don't know what's going to happen at the end of the year. That's a moment in time. We talked about the fact that, you're going to have 5% negatives like every 10 months, right? And you're going to have 10% and 15% negatives, a little bit less frequently. But that doesn't mean that at the end of the year, that's what you're going to lose or gain. So you have to stay invested to see what's going to happen. The 20 worst trading days over the last 20 years, and then the 20 best trading days, it happens that, when you have a really bad negative day, the very next day you have a very good positive day, right? So this is kind of telling you, March 12, 2020, down 9.5%, and then up 9.3% the very next day. But some people, they will sell at the most inopportune time and not get the return. And then what ends up happening is, if you look at a return, let's say you were invested in a particular fund for 10 years, and that fund was averaging 10% per year, but you only average 7% per year. The reason that happens is because people do come in and out of the fund, right? or an individual stock. So if you would have owned Amazon for the last 20 years, if you would have bought it at, an adjusted price of $10 a share, and now it's sitting at 200, just giving some examples, you probably would not have held up until, $200, right? So you don't end up getting the return because we think that that particular company has gained everything that it's going to gain. And if I went from 10 to 50, I shouldn't be a pig. I should come out before I get slaughtered, right? And but if you're looking at this as a long-term investment and you have a portfolio manager that knows how to hold on, in many cases that's going to be better for us. So you can see a number of different days here, the worst day, and then it's the very next day you have the up day. So we're almost done with the slides here. This particular one tells you that different asset classes are going to be at the bottom in any particular year, and in some years they're going to be at the top. So you have the best market on. You had stock emerging market stocks for many years in the beginning there. As you can see in the first part of that, they were at the top, and then they started to drop to the bottom, and then it came back up, or in the middle, and then up again. So you want to be invested in multiple different things. You can't cherry pick. You want to try to invest in different kinds of markets: large cap, mid cap, small cap, perhaps sukuk, real estate funds. You want to be diversified, because in any given year, your particular holding of one part of your holding could be up or down. So you want to manage that with having other types of investments as well. And one of the things that you can do on our website is to figure out what kind of diversification you should have. The amanafunds.com website has this fund selector right on the front page. So if you take a short quiz, which will take maybe 5 minutes, it'll tell you what kind of investor we think you are. And you can take the quiz many times, or you can just look at the PDF that shows aggressive investor or very conservative investor, and it'll tell you what funds to select and what funds to invest in. So it takes some of the guesswork out of it, and you can create your portfolio, and we don't charge anything for that as well. This is a free service on our website. So the key takeaways: whenever you have a down market or an up market, where you're up 30% and then you think you can't be up again, if you look at our Amana Growth Fund, there was a time when it was up, basically almost 30% per year for 3 years in a row. But some people will look at it and say, if you were a hero in 1 year, you're going to be a zero the next year, so I'm going to jump out. But then you would not capture that return. So you have to kind of stay with it and stay calm during those times. And then diversification is going to matter, especially as you get closer to your end result, right? So if you're 30 years old, you definitely can have a lot of money in, tech related and more risk, more risk included kind of stocks and mutual funds. But at some point down the road, as you get closer to being, or needing to withdraw money, you're going to have to take the foot off the gas a little bit. So diversification is going to matter. And then, of course, when everything starts to go a little crazy, you have to remember your strategy and not try to make decisions on the fly, because those emotional times really get the better of us. So I did mention some of our funds: Income Growth, Developing World, and Participation Fund, which is a sukuk only fund. So obviously each one of these has different kinds of risk. And so we don't want anyone to just jump in and start investing. We want you to look at, every piece of it, right? The risk that's involved, what your time horizon is. You probably shouldn't invest in stock mutual funds if you only have 2 years, right? If you're going to invest something for 2 years and then you're going to need the money, you could have 2 negative years and not be very happy. So want you to look at that, the expenses, everything as a whole before investing. And this is my contact information and some of the guys on our team. So if you want to take a snapshot of that, you can as well. And Tanvir, thank you very much for allowing me to present today. My pleasure to do so. And I'd be happy to take some questions.
Yeah, so nicely articulated and some great data points, Owais. I love this question that popped up. When is Amana going to be available on Robinhood?
I don't know the question to that. We have agreements with, I think, something like 300 plus different companies that can offer our funds. And we're, Fidelity is the number one place where people buy us, right? But people can buy us within their 401k as well, just by opening up a brokerage account within their 401k. But Robinhood, I'm not sure. But if somebody comes directly to us, we don't charge any fees to buy and sell the funds.
Okay, we have another one pop up. What is the cost for a mana fund actively traded as percentage of the investment? I think you can see the questions too on your screen. So
Yeah. So it's a good question. And if you look at expense ratios alone without looking at the type of investment that it is and the type of return you're getting, you're not getting the full picture, right? But we did introduce something called an institutional fund share price back many years ago, maybe 6 or 7 years ago. And this lowered the cost of our expenses. When I started in 2008, right before then, it was like 1.7%. And the board of Amana, along with Saturna, had made a conscientious decision. As we get larger, we can afford to charge less. And so the goal was to get below 1% on the regular investor shares and even lower outside of that. So it's a 0.25%, typically 0.25% less on institutional. And the way you get institutional is buying through any qualified account. So education savings, health savings, IRA. So you're looking at, we have 4 funds between 0.5% all the way up to maybe 0.99%, depending if you have institutional or investor shares. And we can answer those questions for you and share, where you can find that information as well. You can go to amanafunds.com and find it right on the front page.
can you take one more question, Owais? Just popped up on your screen.
Okay. So in my opinion, does a 60-40 portfolio allocation still make sense for most long-term investors, 20 to 30 years? I don't give any type of, advice like this until I find out all of the different factors that the person has to offer, right? So, their risk tolerance has a lot to do with portfolio allocation, right? So for some people, even if they have 20 or 30 years down the road, they may not be able to do 60% in equities. Why? Why would that be? That's because they're going to have a stomach ache the minute that their $10,000 investment becomes $9,900, right? So, generally speaking, it's good to have some type of portfolio allocation like this, but I would not generalize anymore on this type of thing.
That's great. So with that, I think we are wrapping up your session. Owais has shared his contact information. For follow-up questions, reach out to him or folks on his team. They will surely follow up. Owais, thank you so much for coming. For future, we'll probably love to do like a workshop that worked very well. Next event, and we'll collaborate, and can't wait to break bread with you again, wherever we can meet.
Absolutely. Sounds good. And this is going great. So hopefully everyone sticks around for the entire thing.
Appreciate it. So we are down to the last 2 topics. The final one is Bitcoin. And for those who want to, get some knowledge on Bitcoin, we'll have Shamoon, cover some stuff and then open it up for a bunch of questions like many of our other sessions. So please do, hang in there. The next topic is a very interesting one. It's in the topic of franchising. And I think I really like this topic for a few reasons, right? I go down to a franchise, which is like a chain of very nice delis. And the really cool thing is I never see the owner there, right? I think he's a corporate job, but he's also got this franchise to his income, and it runs, it runs pretty well. The fact is, I go quite often in the evenings, to grab a veggie sandwich, and I never see the owner, which makes me think like, hey, this is a pretty nice way to supplement income, right? Also, recently in the technology sector, maybe not have happened in other industries, but at least in the Bay Area, the technology sector, we saw a lot of accomplished people just getting laid off, even though it wasn't their fault, right? It was like you're doing very well in the corporate world, you're performing everything, but just a lot of these mass layoffs and a lot of qualified people, get cut, right? And if you get cut in a later age, I think franchises within the family, having one or more franchises, if it's the right halal franchise, can be a beautiful way to supplement income, maybe potentially replace one spouse's income, especially if you have more than one franchise, right? And even if it's a high-paying job, you get a couple of franchise businesses, and it might, replace a spouse's income, so that spouse can take care of the family and not have the stress of a highly demanding corporate job, right? So there's so many different ways to look at it, but not all franchises are good, right? I've spoken to some franchise owners who said, hey, this is like a glorified job with a lot more headache, right? So that's why we have someone who's very knowledgeable in the franchise world. He's been helping many folks set up franchise businesses. I heard him do a talk at a Shine Labs event. One of our community partners is Shine Labs, and he did a talk on franchising that was very well received. So we invited Brother Amir Aghai, who is not only a certified and qualified business broker that helps in the buying and selling of businesses, but he's also very knowledgeable in the space of franchising, and he does commercial real estate as well. But his topic today is the good, bad, and ugly of franchising. He's based in the San Francisco Bay Area. Some of the things he covered in our last session were really helpful because, again, you don't want to get caught with the wrong franchise. So he will spend a few minutes talking about his experiences. Then we'll open it up for Q&A. It's going to be fairly informal. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Brother Amir Aghai for this talk on the good, bad, and ugly of franchising.
Brother Tanvir, thank you. Salam, everyone. I hope I live up to that introduction. I'm not as knowledgeable as you said, but I know a few things, and I hope that my talk will be helpful. It's basically everything you described in terms of why you want to get a franchise, especially at a time where the job situation becomes a little bit hard and layoffs start, especially on the tech side, and people will start thinking about taking the matter of their destiny into their own hands, basically, and run their own business. Now, it does take a special type of person in a way to do your own business. Self-employment is risky. Self-employment is tough. It's stressful. But it can be done. You got to take the first step, be willing to take a little bit of risk and go for it. And the rewards can be enormous depending on how you approach this whole thing. Franchising comes in extremely handy. I mean, you want to start your own business. You got to deal with landlord, lease, negotiation on the lease, employees, vendors. These days we hear about supply chain problems, not getting the material that you need. For example, if you're a retail outlet, it becomes really hectic. At the very beginning, at the very least, you got to decide how you want to structure your business. Proprietary, one ownership. You want to go LLC, you want to go limited partnership, you want to have an S corporation, you want to have a corporation. How much of a risk do you want to take? Do you want to have your taxes, double taxation with the corporation? You want to just pass everything through to yourself. So that first step is also very important. Franchise business in more than one way can help with a lot of the issues that you have when you set up a business. The problem is you got to find out if you're the type of person that can accept franchise. As Brother Tanvir explained, that was great introduction. This is true. Some franchises are glorified jobs. I mean, you got to be careful. I was reading about Chick-fil-A. One of my previous clients just called me. I sold his independent deli shop in Sacramento. He calls me, Bahman, and says, Amir, can you look into Chick-fil-A for me? And I said, this is going to involve a lot of money, and I know he doesn't have the cash. And he said, no, they told me $10,000 I can get into it. I look it up. $10,000 initially, you put a deposit for them to actually accept you to come in to sit down and talk with them. But the actual investment required is somewhere between 500,000 to 1.5 million. The smart thing for that company is they're going to finance you. You have a little bit of cash, they finance you. Well, they finance you, you're working for them full time in order to pay that money back. So essentially, you become chained and bounded by them, and they're getting somebody to manage a store maybe 80 hours a week without paying him a salary. Very gimmicky, very tricky. And you do this for 2-3 years with the hope that you're going to get to a point, overcome the issues that you're having, and collect a little bit money, save a little bit money, and then start making, and you get to a point where you realize it's not going to happen and you give it up. So they turn it to somebody else. Is it a good franchise? Probably not. So franchises, if you're the type of person, again, it's like somebody who wants to buy a single family home versus somebody who wants to live in a condominium. You got restrictions. I'm running a condominium right now, the one that I live in, and that's why I've been busy not being able to contact you guys more often. But you got to see if you accept somebody telling you what to do. So you're not completely an independent entrepreneur. That's the bad side of it. You got to accept that. You got to be able to take that. There are some of our folks that I talk to them, and they're very mad. For example, with 7-Eleven. Oh, 7-Eleven does this. They tell me to do this. They tell me to do that. Well, at the beginning, you knew what you're getting into. There is something called franchise disclosure documents. All franchises, in order to be able to operate in the US, when they start the business, they have to file before selling the franchise to anyone. By the way, you can be an existing business with a good concept that has become successful, and after a while you decide you want to go and franchise it. We have seen a few of these with the halal food business around these restaurants. The first step that you have to do, you gotta hire an attorney to write you a franchise disclosure document, basically spelling out exactly the responsibilities of the franchisor and the franchisee, both of them, to the most intimate detail. It's usually a very thick book. There are a federal FTC, Federal Trade Commission, and a state organization that actually come and regulate these franchises. You have to pass both of them. You have to file the franchise disclosure document, and California, I believe, it's called State Franchise Corporation. There's some name like that. I don't exactly remember what the exact name is. But you file for that. They give you the agreement. They give you the nod, and you start selling the concept. The franchise business basically gives you the complete package. Let's take 7-Eleven. They approve the site, or they already that you might be able to choose. 7-Eleven is very restricted. By the way, 7-Eleven does sell alcohol, beer and wine. But there are 7-Elevens, and the reason I'm talking about 7-Eleven because I've been involved with them a lot. There are sites that do not sell beer and wine. But you got to be careful if you decide to go that route, that if you get a store that does not sell the alcohol, that the franchisor 7-Eleven does not ask you to involve yourself on a daily basis with the community around you, to ask them, with the city specifically, to ask them to issue the license. Sometimes they don't have the license, but that's temporary, a year or two, because city decided to go to ABC and deny the alcohol for whatever reason for that location. So if you get into a 7-Eleven without the beer and wine, don't count on it forever to be without alcohol. So if you can, basically you need to stay away from that one. But again, they give you the site, they approve the site, they negotiate with the landlord. So that's one advantage of some franchises. Some other franchises, such as uh, let's say Taco Bell or Extra Mile, Chevron. There's a whole lot of different ones, or basically an oil changer of sorts. Those you have to find the site yourself. You have to negotiate the lease yourself. One of the franchises that does almost everything is 7-Eleven. There's a couple of others that are involved completely. Um, McDonald's is another one. So that's the initial part. Then they give you basically a pamphlet. You go through training with them, how to hire, who to hire, what products you can sell, what you cannot sell. Uh, Also, maybe if there is a leeway in terms of the product that you sell or the product you offer. Uh, some franchises are not that involved. Retail franchises usually are more involved, such as 7-Eleven or any food franchise. By the way, food franchises or any food business, generally speaking, is very risky. You have to know that. You could be making a ton of money one year, and next year you could be sitting on a business that is not performing in any form or fashion. So it's more of a, feast and fashions famine situation with this, with some of the food businesses. The Another advantage of franchise, a normal business, you basically, even if you hire a manager, you have to be on top of it all the time, because the money comes in, and if you don't have a proper system to trace that money, to trace the sales money that comes in, any receivables, you're going to have problem. You're going to have problem with the money vanishing. Even a system like 7-Eleven, which is extremely regulated and extremely streamlined, still have some problems with lost inventory, uh, lost cash. All that plays in there. Individual business has that issue. Franchise has less of that issue because they have systems in place, procedures that are helping you to trace it. So it's easier to put somebody as a manager in charge and walk away from it and come back on a weekly basis to check things. That can be done. That in itself is also risky. So that's another good thing about franchises. The other one is, we heard about supply chain issues. Again, uh, vendors, selecting vendors, having credit to be able to purchase from the vendors. Sometimes you need inventory for 1, 2, 3 months, and you have to have that inventory sitting there. That's money that you have to put out if you're an individual business owner, and gradually sell that to get refurbish uh, your bank account. you have less of that issue with, for example, 7-Eleven, because they are going to do that for you. The vendors rely on the franchisor's credit worthiness, and they extend that credit to you. On your own, it's going to be tough. Um, it's going to be tough, especially in the last few years, again, because of the supply chain problems with everything coming from China, a lot of it not being manufactured in the US to get the products that you need for sale. So franchise helps in more than one way in that fashion. And again, one thing you need to know, most of the, if when it comes to retail, most of the inventory loss happens not because of the customers. Everybody thinks that when you have a retail store, somebody walks in and they walk out with the product, and that's how you lose your merchandise. Shoplifting. Shoplifting is only 5% of the total loss of inventory in a retail environment. 10% is employee, 5% are customers, 85% are vendors. The guy who delivers your nacho chips. If you don't have a system in place, the guy comes in, you're busy, brings all the cheese in boxes, you sign the paper. He has given you 85, the invoice says 100. He just stole 15 boxes from you. You don't have the time to check things. You don't have had proper training for the employee to make sure that doesn't happen. When you go with a franchise, it's a different story. It comes, the source is franchisor. They have the process in place, proper process in place, so that happens a lot less. That's another advantage of having a franchisor. But again, you have to be extremely important. You have to be the type of person can take the directions that you are given, accept the restrictions that are put on you, and look at the advantages. One of the problems with businesses, advertising, promoting the business. You don't have that. It's a known brand. When it's a 7-Eleven or it's a McDonald's, everybody knows it. You don't have to advertise anything. The door opens, next day, the sales are the same as the one down the street or similar. You open your own burger shop, it takes a year to two for it to ramp up. Unless you have exceptional product and you can advertise it or somehow get it out to people. We have had success of that format, if you will, among the halal food business, because again, the market is getting bigger and bigger. We have so many Muslims, especially in the Fremont area, and overall in the US. Unfortunately, the perception of the quality is expanding in the society, so non-Muslims even get attracted to it. So that's a little different story, but that one also probably at some point will have its own limits. Again, franchises mostly are in food, in retail, convenience stores, and there are some in fire damage, water damage, flood damage restoration, auto repair shops. Recently, some auto body shops, the oil changers, you have seen them, uh, car wash, and of course, gas stations. Basically, go under the convenience store. One caution here, be careful going forward with gas business. I do recommend, if you have the cash and you want to get into a gas business with convenience, they have a little bit more leeway. If you want to go franchise like AM, PM, in order for you not to basically sell alcohol or have it your own. But my recommendation is, if you have the funds and if you want to go that route, I still do not recommend not to buy a gas station, but make sure you buy something that has a bigger lot. Try to buy the property, because going forward with electric car, we will probably at some point have charging stations that would sell fast charging in the stations, uh, or changing the batteries on the spot, a charged battery set for the depleted one. So that's a possibility. That's a good possibility. And the property itself is worth a lot of money. So try to get as big a property as you can if you decide to go that route. Uh, in terms of the structure, some franchises allow you to set up your own structure. You want to go corporation. Yeah, some franchises do not allow partnership. 7-Eleven is one of them. Most of them do allow partnership. You can choose your structure depending on how you want to do it. Uh, by the way, there is a difference between S corporation, for those of you who don't know, versus LLC. LLC is unlimited partner, if I'm not wrong, and S corporation has a limited number of partnerships. Uh, Both of them obviously are passed through in terms of the taxes. But if a partner gets out of LLC, you got to be careful. If a partner decides not to be a partner in LLC, you have to restructure it. You have to file again. You don't have to do the same with S corporation. Again, do check what I'm telling you, because I might make mistake on that one. But if it's a professional company, it's LLP, as you know, it's not LLC, such as law firms and maybe doctor's office, some other businesses such as that one. Again, franchise is a good business, but you gotta be the type of person who wants and can fit that structure and criteria. You're not fully independent owner. That's good if you accept it, and if you need a structured approach to the business. You don't have to retest the market. You don't have to wait for the business to be successful. You already know the business you're getting in is successful. And but if you want to take the risk and you don't want to take any orders from anyone and you want to be fully entrepreneur and independent, you got to go on your own way. Don't get into franchises. Um, so that's the ugly part of the franchises. And also, one thing you got to know, just like everything else, if you decide to buy a franchise, please do not argue and start uh, going back and forth, arguing with the person who's overseeing your store or your franchise. That guy can be extremely helpful to you, but it can also put you out of business, because they do write up franchisees that do not fully comply with the franchisor's directions. They do get write ups, they get fines. And depending on what the violation is, in the long run, they can lose their franchise. And sometimes you don't necessarily get the money back. It's like foreclosure, they foreclose on you. So you got to be careful. And the person who you have rapport with, contact with, your interface with the corporation is the one that can actually let you get away with a lot of violations and do things that are not strictly allowed by their corporation. So that relationship is extremely important. Don't miss that. Basically, that's a little talk that I had. Again, I can answer questions and add to this. Usually, I like for these talks to be more of an interactive situation, back and forth. So I don't remember anything else that I want to add at this point, unless you guys want to ask questions and we can discuss the
Brother
issues.
Mir, there are a couple of questions, and you've covered very good information. I think stuff that people may not easily find through Google searches or whatever when they're doing the initial scan, right? One of the audience members asked, "What would you rate as your top 5 franchise picks?"
Honestly, if 7-Eleven did not have alcohol, uh, I really like 7-Eleven. It's extremely stable business. If you remember, McDonald a few years ago was in deep trouble. Uh, it was not performing, and I knew a whole bunch of franchisors that were they had to sell their units. There was a couple of others pizza places. Mountain Mike seemed to be doing extremely well, but you got to be very careful. Again, there are some I've run into franchisees that have had 4 or 5 Mountain Mikes, and 3 4 of them have been extremely successful. All of a sudden, one of them bought one in Pleasant Hill, which was close to Round Table, and it got into a world of problems because that Round Table over there was really established for the community, and this guy made a mistake to go in that community. So even with franchise, you got to be careful. 7-Eleven is one. I like AMPM, Arco, and I like anything that has to do with oil change and automotive. Those are automotive is extremely stable. If you are, uh, of course, you need to know well, oil change and all that. You don't need to be a mechanic or know anything. So any oil changers are good. These days, one thing that is becoming hot is franchises that do restoration, flood restoration, fire restoration. Those seem to be very successful. Unfortunately, they charge an arm and a leg, and sometimes it's questionable to me in terms of their ethics. But in terms of successful one, those are also good. But I like automotive. I do like retail. Um Let me see. There are some recent halal. Well, what's the one which is out of New York? I'm having my senior moment. Forgot the name. That became a franchise, but these guys are asking over $2 million for their franchise. It
You talking
just
about halal guys? Are you talking about halal guys?
hello guys, yeah, these guys are just they started on the street corner. All of a sudden, they're asking for over $2 million in order to sell you. Uh, and I've seen them as far in places like Nashville, Tennessee. I actually ate there. Uh, and they are successful, but their initial investment doesn't make sense to me. So those are good franchises.
Brother Amir,
Subway has been
any to
extremely
you that
successful.
has some locations that are locked?
Say it again, brother Tanvi.
But yeah, but Subway, there's a question of non-halal meat, right? For Subway, there is pork. I think there's non-halal meat in the equation.
Yes, it is, but I'm not
Right.
100% sure if you can actually not sell it. I think they might be able to give you a little leeway on that part. But the problem becomes with the customers wanting it and for you not having it, then you lose customer base. Yeah, the Subway has that issue, definitely.
Do you have any experience with Dave's Chicken? They're very popular. It's a spicy fried chicken. It's a spicy chicken, and they have some locations that are halal. Relatively new. They are in LA and the Bay Area. I don't know if they are there in the East Coast, but kind of prominent in California. Dave's
There's
Chicken.
no, that one I don't, but there's a whole host of these halal franchises, especially food one, that has shown up, and some of them are actually run by some Jewish guys. They saw the market, they got into it. One of them, Bergerim, if I'm not
Yeah.
Bergerim, all of a sudden started that way, and some locations advertised that it's halal, and then all of a sudden a couple of other locations completely went non-halal. I believe it was a Jewish guy who started it. Sometimes some of these locations I saw it more of a scam than actual franchise. So you got to be careful. There was a outlet started in LA. They completely copied the franchise disclosure document, FDD, of 7-Eleven. They put their own name on it and sold, God knows, I believe sold as much as $150 million or maybe more of so-called initial deposit from people. Some of them multiple stores, and pocketed the money and vanished. And actually they made 3 stores. I visited them in San Diego and LA because I was very interested. They contacted me out of the blue to sell their franchise because they saw me on 7-Eleven all over the place, and it was basically a copy of 7-Eleven. I visited them. I was really impressed by them, but for some odd reason uh, I started feeling a little vibes that this thing might be more of a scam than anything else, even though they have some locations in place. So a few of my clients came to me and said, "Ami, should I buy them?" I said it was called Quick Mart, and they advertised my name. And I said, no, I'm leaning to basically advice against them because I feel there's something fishy with them. And all of a sudden, the whole thing collapsed and they took the money and they ran. So, yeah, you got to be careful with some of these newer franchises. Got to make sure. One thing which is good to do always, always visit the current franchises that are existing, talk to the franchisees. Those are the best source of information when it comes to looking into a franchise. Don't look at the franchise document disclosure even itself as a good source. Contact a current franchisee who's been in it for at least a year, maybe more, and get feedback from these people. They'll tell you exactly what you're getting yourself into. Sometimes not necessarily. There might be some 7-Eleven people, you franchisees, you contact them, they cuss up the whole system and everything, for example. But that doesn't necessarily mean you pose the question, and I always pose the question after they start telling me how bad it is. I said, okay, you got 3 locations right now, you got 4 locations. You hate it. I said, yeah. I said, give it to me, let me sell it for you. No. Okay, if you hate it, why don't you want to get out of it? No answer. So it irritates them. At the same time, they don't want to sell it. It irritates them because of the franchise structure. But if you're not willing to sell it, then that means you're making money and you're good with it. And maybe you don't want more competition. I actually ran into someone, and his excuse, I realized that he doesn't want more franchisee prospects so that he can actually be able to pick up more stores for a lower price. He didn't want competition. As pity as that one was, but I saw that attitude in him. So depends. You got to talk a whole bunch of different people to make sure you're getting the right story.
This is great. Brother Mir, we'd have loved to have you continue, but we are out of time getting ready to bring up the next speaker. But before we wrap up, one more question. There were some comments that Dunkin' Donuts is a good franchise, and Popeyes. In the West Coast, we don't see too many Dunkin' Donuts. I think they are huge in the East Coast. There's a sister who asked this question. I'm in rental investment and considering commercial real estate, specifically triple net. What are top few halal franchise real estate you would recommend? Yeah,
Oh,
I'm not sure of that.
she wants to buy the real estate of the franchises
Seems like
in
that.
place.
Yeah, Sister Reshma, maybe you can clarify on text through text for that question.
Well, obviously, one of the most established ones are halal guys. That is a known fact.
Do you
But
own the real estate for halal guys, or you're just leasing, right? You're not buying the real estate underneath this.
well, a lot of people, I ran into a lot of people that wanted to buy the location of the franchises. For example, 7-Eleven owns half of their locations, and the other half is lease. So the leasehold ones, I've seen a lot of people approach the owner and trying to buy it because they know the lease term with 7-Eleven is 30 years, 35 years. Most of these franchises they are not going to start the location without getting at least a 10-year or 15-year lease with another 5-6 5-year options. So you're looking at a lease of sometimes even 50 years. So they're a steady stream of income. And that's the reason the sister is asking that. It's a very smart way to get yourself a very steady stream of income. But when it comes to halal ones, I really do not have that much knowledge.
Wonderful. Brother Amir, thank you so much. If people need to reach you, can I share your LinkedIn on the chat, or is there a best way for people to reach you if they want, questions on franchising or set up a franchise or anything like that?
My cell phone. Okay. It's all over. Yeah, I don't mind if you share that, or my email address.
Okay. I'll do that. Thank you so much, Brother Amir. Really appreciate you joining us. We wish you the very best, and hopefully we'll do other events with you in the future.
I hope it was helpful.
It definitely was. We've got some great feedback. With that, we've come down to our final session, and we kept it for Bitcoin. It's such a big topic, but there's some interesting things, about Bitcoin, right? I put a poll out there through my contacts, and I was surprised that only 55% of the people who polled were skeptical about Bitcoin, which I thought was a bit on the higher side. Again, we're not offering investment advice on the show, but sharing perspectives as to why some people like Bitcoin and what are the reasons and how they look at it compared to other asset classes, which is the next topic. And I'm going to bring up Brother Shamoon. He's been a CTO at different startups. Right now, he's an entrepreneur doing a venture in the HR and recruiting space. He's been very active with Bitcoin and a big believer in Bitcoin. So you're going to hear some of his perspectives as to why how he looks at Bitcoin compared to other asset classes. He's a phenomenal community member. I see him as one of the founding members for the JM groups that we have. He does a lot of other events as well, like coding workshops, being a strong technologist. He's put a lot of great training programs on Chat GPT and how to leverage Chat GPT, and for kids, coding camps, etc. Very active in the JM community in the Northeast, and every year he runs a barbecue. He calls it the BQ. It's called the Shamoon BQ. It's a popular event in the community there in New York, New Jersey, where dozens of people, a couple of hundred people show up every year, and he hosts them for a beautiful barbecue. If you do get a chance, you should attend that barbecue at least once. You'll have a lot of fun. So without further ado, would like to talk about Bitcoin for our last session. I'd like to bring up Shamoon Siddiqui. Over to you, Shamoon.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay, so first some AV questions. Can we see me and can we see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, you see the screen. Okay, cool. All right. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Thanks so much for sticking around. It's been a great few sessions. So the title of the talk
is a little bit different than the talks I've done in Bitcoin in the past. This one takes a look at other asset classes and what makes Bitcoin a little bit different. So with that being said, that is not a picture of me. That is an AI generated picture of a much better looking version of me. So I couldn't resist, had to use it. But as Brother Tanvir pointed out, some background. I've been doing software development now for quite a while. Currently pursuing my PhD in AI. I've been an entrepreneur, both failed and modestly successful. And apparently I use AI generated pictures myself in presentations. And I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist. I'm in fact a Bitcoin absolutist. So little distinction there. Okay, so the agenda. Trying to be somewhat conscious of time because I know everyone's been hanging out for quite a while. So first we're going to delve into just a little bit of history. By now, most people know most of the history, so I'm just going to cover some highlights that are relevant. Super shallow dive into some of the technicals because that's important to understand how it separates itself from other financial classes. A little, skim on the pool going into the financial aspects of Bitcoin. A brief comparison, and then wrap it all up with hopefully some questions that I can then answer. Little disclaimer. This is not a talk about cryptocurrencies. This is a talk about Bitcoin. In my perspective, you have cryptocurrencies, you have Bitcoin. Two completely different things. They have many things in common, but the things that separate them are far larger than the things that connect them. So I'm not going to be talking about Ethereum or Doge or Floki or any of the other, hot new cool coins out there. This is strictly Bitcoin. Because in my opinion, that's the one that matters. Okay, so it's interesting how the times we're in now. We are in rampant runaway inflation. Interest rates that you get at the bank are hitting 5% if they haven't already. But back in January 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto, whoever he, she, it, they are, embedded into block 0 of the Bitcoin blockchain this headline from the Times: Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. So whoever Satoshi is, clearly he's got something against the infinite spending that has happened for banks and other financial institutions. That's codified in Bitcoin's not just ethos and philosophy, but actually in the code. So this little phrase here, the Times, 03 Jan 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks, for as long as Bitcoin continues to exist, will be in what's called the Genesis block. So let's delve in just a little bit. So as we all know, back in 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto published the white paper. 1 million people publish white papers. No one ever reads them. This was just another one of those. Fast forward 2009, the first Bitcoin block was mined with that Genesis block of the Chancellor on the brink of bailouts for banks. Again, nobody cared. The whole year went by, and suddenly the first Bitcoin transaction was made. There's some dispute as to who it was made with. Hal Finney is an early Bitcoin contributor. There's the famous Bitcoin pizza, 10,000 Bitcoin for a pizza. But 2010 was sort of the year that we could attribute a dollar amount to a Bitcoin amount. And it was in pennies, so it wasn't much. 2011, the first real use case of Bitcoin starts to emerge, or one of the first, and that's the Silk Road. So the Silk Road was this marketplace for illegal things, drugs, whatever else you want. And since you can't buy all that stuff with credit cards, Bitcoin became the method of payment, therefore skyrocketing Bitcoin's usage. 2013, there was an exchange called Mt. Gox, which experienced the hack and then crashed the price of Bitcoin. Fast forward 8 or so years, you have Elon Pi over here purchasing $1.5 billion of Bitcoin. And for a very brief moment in time, they started accepting it as payment for their store, but not for their cars. And also in 2021, El Salvador adopted Bitcoin as legal tender. So that was the beginning of Bitcoin. It's a talk about Bitcoin, so you can't not do it, but there's your mandatory price chart. You can see that it started out at just about asymptotically close to zero. It's right there up until 2017, it looks like. It was effectively under $1 or so. And then for those of us that were around, we remember 2017. shot out of nowhere to $20,000. It went back to sleep around $3,000 for a couple of years. Then in 2021 or so, shot up to almost $70,000, and now it seems to be hanging around 30. That being said, no one knows what the price will be in the future, and as Brother Tanvir mentioned, not here to give financial advice, just the data as it's presented here. Okay, let's get into the technicals. So I'm going to try to skip some of the more boring technical details, but I do recommend that you reach out to me or on your own and learn them, because it's going to be foundational to how I think markets will exist in the future. The problem that Bitcoin actually solved, it wasn't a money sending thing. It wasn't, how to send digital PayPal stuff. It's a very old problem, which was formulated in 1982, called the Byzantine generals problem. And the problem is you have 3 armies, or in this case, let's say 4 armies, and they have to attack some kingdom. They're coming from different directions. If any 2 armies attack, the attack will be successful, or 3 or whatever. But the problem is, how do they communicate this, right? So I know we're talking about money and Bitcoin, but this is the actual problem it solved. You have 4 actors that have no way of communicating with each other, and they need to communicate something to agree on something. But if the red army sends a messenger to the green army, who's to say that the kingdom didn't intercept that messenger? And on we go. So it's a difficult problem, and typically all solutions up until Bitcoin revolved around a central authority. The red army would go to some central general and say, hey, general, we're going to attack at noon. The green army would go to the general says attack at noon, and this general is the one that's in charge of coordinating all this. Bitcoin solved it by having them act independently. Okay? I like to avoid big blocks of text on a slide, but I couldn't really avoid it all that much here. Super high level. Someone A wants to send some Bitcoin to someone B. There's a transaction that's put on the blockchain. The network, in this case, those 4 armies, approve it. And once it's added to the blockchain, it's part of the immutable record. So it's a digital currency with no central authority. Encryption is the core of how all this works. And fundamentally, it has anonymity. However, our use of it can limit some of that anonymity. And since transactions are verified by the Bitcoin network on the Bitcoin network, there's no one involved. No politicians, bankers, whoever. And this part's going to be relevant later. As I'm sure everyone knows by now, there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. There will not be 21 million in 5. There will not be a new monetary policy that suddenly allows for another million Bitcoin. It's only 21 million. However, it's divisible down to 8 decimal places, so that's actually a lot of units of exchange. And as we continue in time, Bitcoin mining gets harder, which means that there's more and more reward for you to do it. Now the financials. Okay, we got some people waking up now. Here we go. This part is key. Every block that's mined, which we very briefly talked about in the previous slide, has a reward. Back when Bitcoin first came out in 2009, the reward is 50 Bitcoin per block. And every 4 years, that block gets cut. That block reward gets cut in half. So in 2012, it was 25 Bitcoin per block. 2016, 12.5, and in 2020, 6.25. And next year, it will be 3 point whatever per block, which means the vast majority of Bitcoin that's ever going to be released has already been released, 18, 19 million. So between now and the year 2140, roughly, there's only going to be about 1 million Bitcoin released at an ever decreasing schedule. The scarcity is what drives the demand. People ask, why does the price of Bitcoin go up? Well, because there's not a lot of it left, fundamentally. But the problem of that scarcity and that deflation is hoarding. The famous Bitcoin pizza, the story is, someone in one of the forums wanted a pizza, Papa John's, I think 2 pies. They posted, if someone gets me a pizza, I'll give them 10,000 Bitcoin. So somebody did, and they got that pizza, probably worth 20, 30 bucks. But now that pizza is worth a hell of a lot more. So knowing that, people are not likely to spend their Bitcoin on things, which creates hoarding, which limits the amount of economic activity that can happen by Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin's not a currency, what is it? Oh, I think there's a thing covering, but it says store of value. And the thing that's covered, I think, is it says finite supply. I'm not saying it's a store of value. So the actual slide is a store of value question mark, because that's one thing that it might be. It might be a store of value. The finite supply makes it a pretty good store of value. Just like gold, there's only so much of it in the world. So if you have some of it, that means somebody else doesn't. It's non-custodial. So assuming you have your security practices in place, there's no one else that can own your Bitcoin. It's decentralized. There's no one that can take it away, no one that can backtrack a transaction, which makes it, again, a good store of value. And the third one's probably the most controversial. In my opinion, there's a lower geopolitical risk. Because it's not backed by government or a central authority, the chance of manipulation is reduced slightly. Of course, big actors can still interfere, but state actors are, at least on an official level, not likely to. So if you had to store value somewhere, Bitcoin seems like a pretty good bet. I'm going to try to rush through some of these because I want to leave time for questions and answers. Okay. So let's talk about other asset classes. I'm sure we've talked about a few already in this this forum. I whittled it down and I picked just a handful that might be helpful to think about in terms of framework. Okay. Real estate. So real estate's ever popular. Everyone wants real estate. Everyone thinks it's a good investment, and it probably is. So what separates these two? Well, Bitcoin, first off, is a digital asset. Real estate is a physical asset. The next one, Bitcoin has no intrinsic value. A Bitcoin is simply worth what people are willing to pay. Real estate has some intrinsic value, at least the reconstruction cost of the building. There's some value there. What drives the price of Bitcoin? Just supply, just demand, and that's it. Real estate price is driven by supply and demand, sure, but the location matters, the quality matters, other things matter as well. If you're going to earn money in Bitcoin, there's only one method, and that's the appreciation of the capital, of the base. There's no other dividend mechanism. There's nothing else you can do to earn money with Bitcoin. Real estate, you can earn dividends as well as cap appreciation. Liquidity, real estate, there's a ton of houses out there, but moving them takes time. They're large transactions, and that leads to the reasonable stability of price versus the extreme volatility of Bitcoin. Stocks. So when people used to think about Bitcoin, they would try to compare it to owning a stock. So I wanted to separate some of these notions right off the bat. If you own a Bitcoin, you have ownership of the Bitcoin, but an ownership stake in nothing. You don't own a part of Bitcoin Corporation because that's not a thing. You don't own anything. You just own that. Technically, you don't even own that Bitcoin. You just have the right to send that Bitcoin because that Bitcoin itself is not a thing that you own. It's just the right to transfer. In stocks, you own at least a tiny, tiny, tiny share of Microsoft, Tesla, whatever. Again, no intrinsic value for Bitcoin. With stocks, at least theoretically, the stock has some value of some discount on future cash flows. If it's a public company and it's going to throw off good cash flows for the next 5-10 years, there's at least a floor on value for what that stock could or should be. Same thing with real estate. Stocks can pay dividends. Bitcoin can't. So I put low liquidity for stocks versus high liquidity for Bitcoin. I actually probably should have put medium liquidity because stocks trade during market hours. So if it's a Saturday and you want to buy some Microsoft, good luck. So I should probably have updated that to medium liquidity. Stocks are reasonably stable. Now, of course, you've got your penny stocks, you have your high flyers, you have your extreme market crashes. But generally speaking, it's unlikely that a particular stock will go up, down 20% in a year. Now, of course, the past 2 years have thrown that theory out the window, but broadly speaking. Cash. Okay. So cash is an asset class. It's mostly non-physical. unless you have a pile of hundreds under your mattress somewhere, it's pretty digital as well. And it's interesting to think of cash having no intrinsic value because all other value is measured against the amount of cash that it's valued at. Cash by itself doesn't have any value. It's just the belief in cash that gives it its value. With Bitcoin, you could potentially earn on the appreciation of Bitcoin, but with cash, you can literally earn nothing, which gives way to the final point of deflation. Because Bitcoin is deflationary, presumably it'll hold value, whereas cash is inflationary, it will definitely lose value every single day of every single year. So my perspective, again, not advice. I'm not one to try to predict the future because I'm not going to be good at it. So I've seen two possibilities. Either Bitcoin exists in 10 years or it does not. If it exists in 10 years, it will be worth more than today because of the deflationary nature. Again, there's less of it. There's more of it that's lost, more of it that's hoarded. So if it exists, it'll be worth more. How much more than today? Maybe 10x, maybe 1,000x. No clue. So reasonable bet is to buy Bitcoin. Not saying to go mortgage your house and buy Bitcoin, which people did do in 2017, in 2019. But a small amount every single day keeps that doctor away. So I think that's about everything I have. So in terms of ways to reach me, you can email me, you can LinkedIn me, and yeah. So what questions, comments, concerns, suggestions?
Hey, Shamoon, that was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. In a few minutes, you walked us through different things that were very relevant. Now, in comparing Bitcoin with other cryptos, and I'm not going by the halal or haram component, but just as to understand that with other cryptos, you could do something called staking, right? Like Ethereum or Polygon, But with Bitcoin, there's no concept of staking, right?
No.
Because there's no proof of stake mechanism, right?
Exactly. So
it's proof of work, right?
All the mechanics of all the staking things out there, but my philosophical perspective of staking is it doesn't make the network more secure. It continues to reward the rich, if you will. If you have 10 ether and I've got 5 ether, you're going to earn more than I will in staking. So the halal and haram, apart from all that, I think from a network security perspective, it's not as secure as thousands or millions of independent machines working with no stake in the game other than future earnings.
Then in terms of Bitcoin adoption, right, do you foresee the big, like the family office money, right, the big money, like 50, people with $50 million or more in assets, will that money eventually come into Bitcoin, or is that not going to happen for a few years?
2020, 21 were interesting because you had a MicroStrategy, which basically changed their entire monetary strategy, their treasury strategy, to be Bitcoin only. Tesla started to follow suit a little bit. Cash started to follow, or Square started to follow suit a little bit. So I could see that being a part of a treasury portfolio. For public companies, it's already kind of happening. For El Salvador, it's already happened. For family offices to have a small percentage in Bitcoin seems like a reasonable bet if they don't already.
Now, this is a question not relevant to Bitcoin, but you're a technologist. Maybe you can do a quick answer for Brother Fuad. What future technologies could be built on the blockchain?
The 2017 plus was a very interesting year. So that was the year of the ICO, the initial coin offering. Every single person out there had a new way to use the blockchain for something. Every single idea was basically take something that we do currently and throw it on the blockchain. And that turned out to not be great because the blockchain is incredibly inefficient and it's designed to be inefficient. A Bitcoin block is designed to take 10 minutes. It doesn't take 10 minutes because it's slow. It's designed to be slow. So then we've had Ethereum. Ethereum allows for smart contracts, of which to date I've been monitoring, and I haven't seen a single smart contract that isn't dumb. Meaning, if there's anything to be done with a smart contract, it has to somehow deal with the real world, and therefore defeats the whole purpose of this, decentralized thing. So I don't know what technologies could be built on blockchain. Blockchain was sold as an amazing solve all for everything, but I don't think it's a great platform upon which to build, generally speaking.
Appreciate that. Another question, also more technology related. Actually, this is currency related, right? Any thoughts on CBDC? And why would governments allow another global currency to compete with them? Do you see more governments adopting or prohibiting it?
So I think that a smart government will fear it more than adopt it. But I think
Will
prohibition
fear
will,
Bitcoin? You mean a government would fear Bitcoin more than adopt it?
yeah, because I think that Bitcoin poses a legitimate challenge to dollar hegemony, right? Like we're talking about China right now. Are they going to take over? Is Saudi going to start trading in non-dollars? Bitcoin allows for all that without the political issues. If a government were to start to ban it, then a lot of money flows out fast. So banning, probably not. Prohibiting, it's impossible. The only thing they could prohibit is the regulation of banking, right? So like, it can never be illegal to own Bitcoin. They could just make it exceedingly difficult to buy Bitcoin.
Good point. There's a question around Lightning. How do you see Lightning Network for Bitcoin will shape the future?
So Lightning has gotten a lot of adoption. It's now built into Electrum and a bunch of other wallets. And so for those that don't know, Lightning is, you could think of it as a layer 2 on Bitcoin that allows for smaller transactions. So if I were to send Brother Tanvir $7 for coffee with Bitcoin, it would be incredibly inefficient because A, it would take time, B, there might be some fees associated, and C, what if him and I have a back and forth, right? So next time he'll buy dinner and he gives me 20, and next time I buy dinner, we go back and forth. With Lightning, we can set up a channel where we keep doing this, and at the end, let's say once a week, it settles only the delta. But again, that presumes that Bitcoin is used as a currency, which I don't see really happening because of the hoarding problem. However, if we're talking about a settlement mechanism for banks for money transfer, I could see Lightning having some potential. Because in a money transfer business, let's say US to wherever back home might be, it's not just that dollars are going from here to, let's say, Pakistan. Rupees are also coming back. So imagine doing that a few dozen times a day, a few thousand times a day, and then only settling with one transaction at the end.
Cool. Then finally, we'll take this as the last question, right? For those who think like, hey, this is just sounds like gambling, right? Like investing in Bitcoin, buying Bitcoin sounds like gambling. What's your take on that?
So, I mean, disclaimer, I'm no fatwa fiqh expert of any kind. Any investment that you make is likely to fail with as much probability as it is to succeed. I believe the thing that separates an investment from gambling is your rationale for investing, right? So if you're and this happened in the ICO craze, right? So people were going nuts over Shiba and Floki, and I would ask them, why are you buying Floki? They would say, oh, because I think it'll go up. To me, that's gambling because you have no basis for it to go up other than you hope that it will, just like you hope that the dice will land 6. If you believe in Bitcoin, Cardano, whatever, and you're wrong, okay. That's like you believing in my bakery that I'm going to start and you being wrong, right? That's life.
Sorry, I lost you the last part. Got distracted by a question.
Oh, I said that if you have a rationale for investing, I think that's what separates it from gambling. Doesn't have to be a good rationale, just a rationale.
There's a question popped up. The tax implications, right? Are these good for long-term holding?
So again, I'm not a tax professional, tax accountant, tax anything. My understanding is just like any appreciating asset, whatever you sell it at, whenever you sell it, minus whatever you bought it, is your capital gains. And you have to pay what your short-term, your long-term capital gains. That being said, my perspective is you shouldn't be thinking of Bitcoin as a 6-month or 1-year investment. You should be thinking about generational planning.
Yeah, on that note, right, Michael Saylor, who I admire as a CEO of MicroStrategy, a very successful software company, he akins buying Bitcoin to buying land in Manhattan 200-300 years ago, right? You don't sell it, you buy it and you hold it. I mean, what is the value of land in Manhattan today, right? It would have been pennies at one point, right? So that's how he describes it. Hey, this was great, Shamoon. I want to be respectful of time. We've also had a 3.5-hour session. I'm thinking in the future, the Halal Money Show will probably keep it down, we'll trim it. We keep it, a little shorter, but overall feedback has been phenomenal. Again, I want to acknowledge the efforts of BayMuslim Media for live streaming this event, and Brother Nilam has been awesome, during the dry runs, and he spent a considerable amount of time on this. And for the record, this is this has been a non-commercial event. We did not take any sponsorship money. We did not charge for the tickets. We did not pay money to any of our speakers or ask money for any of the companies. This was purely done for community benefit. We'll hope to roll up other programs in the future. Once again, thank you to all the community partners who joined us, all the speakers, Shamoon. And we kept a very exciting topic for the end, and I appreciate you doing your part. And like I said to other speakers, I'm sure we'll do other events with you as well. So with that, I want to sign out. Thank you again, everyone. I think we had a healthy audience for every session. Great participation. It's been very positive feedback, and we hope to have many other episodes of the Halal Money Show in the future, and an annual conference, the Halal Money Expo. So be safe, everybody. Have a great weekend. I think we got done with Ramzan recently. So, hope you have a great weekend. And please do watch our videos, share it, give us feedback, and, we can build a community all around this Islamic finance and Islamic fintech space. So Jazakallah khair, our best wishes, and Assalamu alaikum to everybody.